Chapter 419. If one's eyes were sharp enough, if one's eyes were the eyes of Emo Chingdi, then one would know how marvelous this sword was. At least in Emo Chingdi's eyes, this sword was not static and ordinary. It was not a branch, but a real sword. A peerless sword. It was trembling slightly, out of fear and excitement. Perhaps it was because of his birth. It was the sword that was trembling, not Chiba's hand that was trembling. He had stabbed out tens of millions of times. No matter what the situation was, his hand that held the sword never trembled. The body of the sword had a life of its own. It had an independent consciousness. It aimed at the old drunkard's eyebrows, eyes, throat, chest, heart, or abdomen. It could even attack the lower body of the old drunkard, piercing the 29 acupoints of the old drunkard and the 72 acupoints of the old drunkard's calf. It covered all the fatal points on the old drunkard's body, as well as all the acupoints on the old drunkard's body. The name of the sword was unintentional. In other words, at the moment of the final attack, even Chiba himself did not know where he would stab. It was only a few tenths of a second, or even less. You couldn't blink, you couldn't breathe, and your heart didn't beat. The interval between one heartbeat and the next, it was shorter than that. Chiba disappeared from where he stood and stabbed at the old drunkard's throat. Yes, at the last moment, he finally locked on to the target he wanted. The throat. The sword pierced the throat. The old drunkard finally moved. The old drunkard finally moved. He rushed toward Chiba with the long stick in his hand. He left an afterimage where he stood, and his body turned into nothingness. In an ugly and barbaric manner, he raised the long stick in his hand and stabbed it towards Chiba Shinobi. The stick didn't even have a sharp spearhead. Their bodies brushed past each other. Or it could be said that two blurry shadows brushed past each other. It was just a change of position. It was just a change of the way they interacted. From standing face to face, they stood with their backs to each other. Chiba stood where the old drunkard had just stood, and the old drunkard also stood in Chiba's footprints. Then, everything became still. Their bodies gradually became clearer, and they became two living bodies, no longer a blurry shadow. The gray sky was like someone's black face, and the white world was so dreamy. Two men in loose robes with big sleeves stood in a small independent courtyard. Because of the small size of the courtyard, their figures seemed strangely tall and imposing. Just like the war gods of ancient times. The branch in Hashimoto Chiba's hand was dripping blood. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops. The red blood slowly melted the snow on the ground. The chest area of the old drunkard's gray robe was dyed brown with blood. Just when the old drunkard thought that the sword would stab his throat, the thousand-leaves soldier changed his move and attacked his chest again. There were only a few people in this world who could accelerate at such a fast speed. The wooden stick in the old drunkard's hand flew away towards the wooden door of the small courtyard. Like a spear, it stuck in the middle of the wooden door. Half of the stick went in, leaving only a short section exposed in the courtyard. "Why?" the old drunkard asked in a heavy voice. 20 years ago, I lost to you," Hashimoto Chiba said softly. His voice was soft and gentle, as if he was reluctant to leave and relieved. "That's the reason, 20 years later, I lost to Fang Yen. That's the reason. Hua Xia is too powerful." Hashimoto Chiba sighed and said, "Hua Xia is too powerful. 20 years ago, I had the ambition to conquer Hua Xia with Japanese kendo and make it more powerful. Unfortunately, before I could take that step, I was forced back by you. 20 years later, I gathered the courage to go east again. The result was even worse than the last time. I was defeated by a nobody in Huaqing. Fang Yen is a genius in martial arts, and there are not many geniuses like Fang Yen in Huaxia. Even a young girl who is close to Fang Yen, with her talent, will not be inferior to me in the future. I still have hope after losing to you. I hope that one day, I will come back with a sword and wash away the shame with blood. But when I saw them, I really lost all hope. There are too many talents in Huaxia, and the young people in Huaxia are too powerful. It's a pity that we don't have any young men and women like them. Not even one. God is so unfair to us. I've always been curious about what kind of magic the land of Huaxia has, how it can raise its children to be so outstanding and brave. I'm alive, they see me as a god, as the hope of Japanese martial arts. I know very well that I'm not their hope. I will only bring them illusory psychological comfort and a temporary dose of spiritual medicine. This kind of psychological comfort and spiritual medicine can deceive them, can numb them, let them still have expectations and fantasies. I believe that one day, I will bring them victory and glory. The consequences of this are too heavy. You single-handedly fought against dozens of Japanese islands, your glory was boundless, and you completely trampled on the dignity of Japanese martial arts. You made Hua Xia the Green Dragon, but none of the Japanese martial arts came out. Everyone hid in their own small homes and licked their wounds. Our generation has completely lost. What about the next generation? When a young man like Fang Yen truly grows up, when he becomes an incomparably sharp sword like you, when he does what you did all those years ago, charging into the East Ocean alone with a sword, when that time comes, who among the East Ocean's youths will be able to stop him? Who can go against him? My generation has lost, bringing fear into the hearts of the young martial arts. If the next generation of martial arts loses, what kind of psychological impact will it have on the next generation of martial arts? Every time we lose, the morale will drop. After losing 3 times in a row, where will the morale be? Where will the talents be? Who will protect our people? Who will guard our country? Chiba of the army covered his throat and coughed lightly. Fresh blood dyed his palms red. Blood flowed out from the gaps between his fingers, drawing a delicate abstract picture. Don't underestimate your enemy. I really envy you. Envy that you were born in the great Hua Xia. Envy that you have this black land under your feet. Envy that you have so many talents. Envy that you are proud and fearless. How good would it be if Fang Yen was from our country? How good would it be if Fang Yen was from our country? If that's the case, why would I have to walk on this path of no return? Why would it be like this? The old drunkard said with a sigh. Only when you are alive will there be hope. Only when you are alive can you see a longer future. Living is the most important thing. From the azure dragon of Hua Xia to the drunkard of today, the tendons in his hand are broken, and there is no hope for him to recover. The woman you love the most has left you, sinking your heart into a swamp and plunging you into eternal hell. Every day you are sober is a day of pain. Every time you think, you are sad. I am such a poor person, but I still live. If I were to die, I don't know how many times I would have died. You are alive because you still have hope in your heart. Chiba Hirobumi said softly, I haven't seen you for many years, but I didn't expect that my old friend, who was famous in Hua Xia, would fall into such a situation. Your meridians are broken because you believe that they will break out of the cage one day. The woman you love the most has left you because you believe that she will come back one day, or that she has always been there. There is really no hope for me to live. 20 years after another 20 years, how many more 20 years can I have? In the next 20 years, when my hair is white, will I have the courage to go east again with a sword to challenge the heroes of Hua Xia? At that time, I am afraid that I can't even hold the sword steadily, right? I can't save the Japanese martial arts if I am alive. Only when I am dead can they be completely desperate. Chiba Hirobumi said with a very firm voice. He believed in the future he hoped for. Only when people are at their most desperate can they burst out with unimaginable potential. I believe in the thousands of Japanese martial arts practitioners, and I look forward to their future. I know that countless young talents like Fang Yen will grow up among them. Only then will there be the prosperity of Japan and the resurgence of Japanese martial arts. Do you have any regrets? Regrets? Chiba Hirobumi thought for a moment and said, I hope that I won't be put on a pedestal by others in my next life. Because once I go up, I can never come back down. I just want to be a swordsman. Chiba Hirobumi's body slowly knelt on the ground, and then he lay flat on all fours in the snow. The wooden stick had pierced through his abdomen, leaving a pitch-black hole there. The white clothes on his body were dyed red by the blood, and the snow on the ground was also dyed red by the blood. White clothes and white snow had become red clothes and red snow. Chiba opened his eyes and looked at the sky above his head, saying, "We Dongyang do not have such a land, so I will bury myself here. I will turn myself into a handful of dust here. Bless my people to have more strong men. Bless the martial arts of Dongyang to prosper. Please forgive my selfishness," Chiba Hirobumi said with a chuckle. "Because only dying in your hands is a true liberation for me." "I forgive you," the old drunkard said gently. "The strong are lonely, and Fang Yen also needs an opponent to sharpen himself." "We've agreed that the winner will drink to the winner," Chiba Hirobumi said with a smile. The smile came from the bottom of his heart, warm and peaceful. The old drunkard walked to the corner, picked up a large jar, and gulped it down. His head and face were covered in alcohol, and his stomach was filled with it. He poured the remaining half of the jar next to Chiba Hirobumi's head. Chiba Hirobumi smelled the rich fragrance of the wine and closed his eyes with a gratified expression. The Japanese sword god Chiba Hirobumi had fallen. Chapter 420. Little White was Fang Haohen's rabbit. It liked to eat vegetable leaves and corn chips. It also had a very bad habit of drinking alcohol. It liked to drink the shadaozi in the old drunkard's yard. Every time it was Fang Haohen's turn to bring food and soup to his master or help his master clean up the yard, he would bring Little White over to have a sumptuous meal. At that time, it would drink the shadaozi in the yard as it pleased. Every time, it would lie on the ground drunk and be carried back by Fang Haohen like a little drunkard. Today, as usual, Fang Haohen carried Little White over to help his master clean up the house. He also gave the alcoholic Little White a small plate of shadaozi to celebrate its growth of 1 year. Suddenly he saw Chiba Haowu standing at the entrance of his master's yard. Fang Haohen's face was full of vigilance. He immediately rushed to the entrance of the yard, stared at Chiba Haowu and shouted, "Chiba Haowu, what are you doing here?" Seeing that Fang Haohen was full of hostility towards him, Chiba Haowu immediately put on a posture that made it seem like he would counterattack at any time. All right. Fang Yen waved his hand and said, "Why are you pretending to be a loyal and filial son? I'm standing here. If they want to do something bad, how can I let them in?" Fang Haohen chuckled. Both sides of his cheeks were deeply sunken. Even if the skin on his entire face was cut off, it would still be less than 2 ounces. Fang Haohen walked in front of Fang Yen and whispered, "Junior martial uncle, these 2 Japanese, slap." Fang Yen slapped him on the head and said angrily, "He doesn't understand Hua-Xia language. You don't have to speak so sneakily." "Oh, then I'm relieved." Fang Haohen breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Why did they come to our swallow dock? Aren't they looking for trouble? I'm going to ring the alarm bell at the entrance of the village and get everyone to come and wrap them up like dumplings. They've all come to our doorstep and into our yard. Aren't they bullying us?" "Shut up," Fang Yen said. "Do you know what it means by heroes cherishing heroes?" "I know." In Fang Yingying's eyes, the most awesome person is Fang Yingying. This is what they mean by heroes cherishing heroes. Fang Yen slapped Fang Haohen's head again. It was impossible to explain things to these 2 little bastards. Fang Haohen dodged with the rabbit in his arms and said in a wrong tone, "I didn't say anything wrong. It's not like you don't know the condition of Master's body. They came here to show off, aren't they just making things difficult for Master? What does Master care about the most?" What he was most concerned about was that his meridians were severed, and there was no way for him to return to his peak state. If that old man, who was always pretending to be mysterious, challenged Master, with Master's temperament, he would definitely not refuse. What was this? When a tiger falls to the plains, it will be bullied by dogs. If he's so capable, let him fight you. Fang Yen knew that Fang Haohen was worried about the safety of the old drunkard, and the possibility of what he said was very high. Moreover, didn't the Chiba army come all the way here to finish the unfinished battle in the past? If the Chiba army challenged the old drunkard would definitely not refuse. Just like when Fang Yen was challenged by the Chiba army, although he was scared to death, even if he really had to die, he would not refuse. Some things had nothing to do with life and death, but with dignity. In the past, the old drunkard used to drown his sorrows with alcohol. If he was forced by external forces, the old drunkard would probably die to drown his sorrows. Such a proud man, such a glorious hero, had fallen into such a situation. Perhaps living was more of a torture than dying, right? However, even knowing this answer, Fang Yen still did not stop the two of them from meeting. Because, except for the old drunkard himself, no one was qualified to make such a decision for him. For such a man, what they needed the most was understanding and respect, not protection and pity. Fang Yen looked at Fang Haohen and said, "Is there any use in stopping them?" Fang Haohen shook his head. "Then stand aside and pray," said Fang Yen. Fang Haohen stared at Chiba Haohen unkindly and said, "Since we have nothing to do, why don't I beat him up? Who asked his father to challenge my master?" Fang Yen glanced at Chiba Haohen and said, "Whatever." The person he respected was the Chiba army, and as for this guy, he really did not have a good impression of him. He also knew that Chiba Haohen did not have a good impression of him either. If the opportunity was ripe, maybe this guy would stab him with a knife. Fang Yen was on guard against him. In the end, Fang Haohen did not challenge Chiba Haohen, because just as he was about to do so, he heard the sound of wood breaking in the yard. "They've started fighting," said Fang Haohen anxiously. He hugged Little White tightly in his arms, like an ugly little girl who had been frightened. It would be difficult to find a woman uglier than Fang Haohen. Chiba Haohen also heard the sound, and did not have time to guard against Fang Haohen's possible sneak attack from behind. He quickly ran to the wooden door, wanting to look through the gap. Fang Yen took a step forward and pulled him aside from the door. If the two men inside were to kill each other, this small yard would be torn apart by them in minutes. Even a branch or leaf flying out from inside could kill someone. Chiba Haohen ran to the door and lay down, and if he was not careful, he would be killed. To be honest, Fang Yen really did not care about Chiba Haohen's life, because he had always felt that this guy was too narrow-minded and evil. However, if Chiba Haohen came out and found his son dead, would he suspect him of being the culprit? It would not be good to cause such a misunderstanding. After a few noises, there was no more movement in the yard. Fang Haohen looked at Fang Yen, and Chiba Haohen also looked at Fang Yen. Fang Yan's expression was solemn, but he did not say anything. He could feel the murderous aura in the yard, and the situation did not seem right. Thinking of all the strange things that happened when Chiba Haohen came, Fang Yen had a very bad feeling. These two people were not going to fight to the death, were they? Fang Yen became anxious and hesitated whether he should push open the wooden door and force his way in. Creak! The wooden door opened from the inside. The old drunkard stood at the door and first glanced at Chiba Haohen, then said to Fang Yen, "Japanese sword god Chiba Haohen died in battle." "Father." Chiba Haohen had already seen his father's body lying in the snow on the ground and miserably threw himself over. Fang Yan's expression was gloomy as he looked at Chiba Haohen's serene face after his death. He was alive and well just a moment ago, but now he had become a corpse without breathing or a heartbeat. Life was impermanent, that was all. She recalled the first time they met. She recalled their battle at One Sword Peak. She recalled how he suddenly jumped up and pushed her away to avoid the shots of those flying people. She recalled how he stood under the osmanthus tree in the courtyard in his white robe. She also recalled how he asked her to stop the car by the roadside and run into the wheat field like a child. She then stepped on the cold black soil with her bare feet. "Father." Chiba Haohen put his hand on the wound on his father's stomach, but no matter how hard he tried, the blood kept gushing out. Not only from the front, but from the back as well. The large piles of snow in the yard were melted by the warm blood, and the melted ice and blood mixed together, forming even more ice water. The ice water soaked Chiba Haohen's body like a natural hotbed. As the blood from Chiba Haohen's body kept gushing out, the color of the ice water became thicker and thicker. The yard was filled with the smell of blood. Chiba Haohen saw the branch in his father's hand, so he grabbed it and charged at the old drunkard who was drinking from a wine jar in the corner. "I'm going to kill you!" Chiba Haohen yelled, looking a little hysterical. He was going crazy. He was going crazy. He never thought that he would encounter something like this while accompanying his father to visit a friend in Beijing. The man who was like a god of war in his heart, the undefeated hero, was lying in a pool of blood like his previous opponents. How could he die? How could he die? He was the Japanese god of war, his most powerful father. All this time, he had been under his father's care and protection. He was arrogant because his father was the Japanese god of swords. He worked hard because his father was the Japanese god of swords. He always felt that he still had a lot of time. Under his father's guidance and protection, he would definitely be able to achieve as much as his father. Perhaps even more dazzling than his father. But why was his father suddenly gone? It was this man who took his father away. He wanted to kill him, he had to kill him. Whoosh! He was only halfway there when a large jar of wine suddenly poured over his head. The cold wine drenched his clothes and messed up his hair. Even the white silk tied around his forehead loosened and was about to fly away. Most importantly, it froze him from head to toe and sobered him up. His eyes turned blood red, and he stared unblinkingly at the old drunkard. His breathing was rapid, but his body seemed to have been immobilized, unable to move at all. The old drunkard didn't get angry. He looked at him expressionlessly and said, "You are a lucky guy because you have a great father. You are also a tragic guy because your father is too great." Chiba still stared unblinkingly at the old drunkard. He seemed to understand what the old drunkard said, but it also seemed like he didn't understand anything. The old drunkard shifted his gaze to Fang Yen and said, "He wants to stay and let his body become a pile of dust in Huaxia. If he wants to see the vastness and depth of Huaxia, then let him have a good look. If he wants to use his feet to measure the courage and foundation of Huaxia, then let him have a good look. Let him wear my shroud, live in my coffin, and enter my tomb, a grand burial." Chapter 421. According to the customs of the villagers, it was a very inauspicious thing to hang a white banner in the first month. However, to the people of Swallow Dock, it was nothing out of the ordinary. On the eve of the Lunar New Year's Eve, the family would gather together to eat, drink, and happily welcome the new year. Then, they would receive a call from the northern borderline or the southern sea. Their family members had unfortunately died in battle. Everyone would silently put down their bowls, chopsticks, and wine glasses, and raise the white flags that had been prepared under the boxes. They believed that the white banners could summon souls. They couldn't retrieve the corpses of their loved ones, and most of the time, they couldn't even retrieve their ashes. However, they hoped that they could summon the souls of their loved ones back to their roots so that they could meet in their dreams. Sacrifice was the norm. However, this was the first time Swallow Dock had raised the white banner for a foreigner, and it was for an East Asian at that. Qianyebin died in battle. According to his last words, he hoped that he would stay in Huaxia and let his body turn into a pile of dust. The old drunkard gave Fang Yen full authority to handle this matter. He also gave his shroud, coffin, and tomb to the Thousand Leaves military department. Yes, making burial clothes, making coffins, and reserving graves for the living was also an ancient tradition of Swallow Dock. Moreover, only the most respected person in the family would receive such preferential treatment and glory. These people could enter the ancestral mountain after they died, and their spirit tablets could be placed in the family's ancestral hall. Now, the old drunkard had given this honor to the Thousand Leaves military department. Of course, the memorial tablet of the Thousand Leaves military department could not be placed in the Fang family's ancestral hall. Everyone was worried that the Qianye division of the army would fight with the ancestors of the Fang clan after they entered. After all, everyone's habits and way of thinking were still very different. Fang Yen conducted the funeral for Qianye and hung white banners on the tallest camphor tree in the courtyard of the Fang family. Bai Hui personally wrote an elegiac couplet for Hero Bai to hang on the door, a foreign guest from the Chiba army, a hero of heaven and earth, the Japanese sword god. Fang Yixing led Fang Hao, Zhao Qingxin and the rest to slaughter pigs and sheep, preparing for the feast. The old drunkard said he would give him a proper burial, so naturally, the Fang family would give him a proper burial. Banquets were an essential part of a grand funeral. Whenever there was a wedding or a funeral, the villagers had to be invited to have a good meal. The more extravagant and lively the banquet, the more it could be called a funeral. This was no different from the outside world. At the door of the small house, the teacher was holding a big teacup and looking in the direction of the Fong family. He asked, "What's the matter with the Fong family?" The Japanese sword god Chiba came to Swallow Dock to challenge Mo Qinglong and died in battle. After his death, he left his last words, hoping that he could be buried in Huaxia and become a pile of dust in the earth. The Fong family is currently preparing for his funeral. Bai Xiu, who was standing behind him, replied softly, "How much power have you recovered from underestimating the enemy?" The teacher asked. "Less than 50%. How powerful is the Thousand Leaves army?" 20 years ago, they were evenly matched. After 20 years of comprehending the swordsmanship of the Chiba military division had become even more refined. 10,000 swords become one. He was almost invincible in East Asia. Those who saw the battle with Fang Yan at One Sword Peak said that he was a very terrifying opponent. If it weren't for Fang Yan's sudden breakthrough in his Taiji heart, it would have been very difficult for him to win this match. In that case, how did Mo Qingdi defeat Qin Yebing, who was at his peak condition with less than half of his strength? "He came to seek death," Bai Xiu said with a sigh. "The Fong family values kinship and righteousness. They did a good job." The teacher pondered for a long time and said, "Hang my white banner." "Mister," Bai Xiu stopped him. If the teacher hung the white banner, the death of the Thousand Leaves army would become a big deal for the entire Swallow Dock. "Hang it." The teacher waved his hand and said firmly. Mr. hung the white banner. Fang Yinging ran to Fang Yan and said while panting. The Yi family hung the white banner. Fang Haohan moved to Fang Yan and whispered. The Li family hung the white banner. The Ruan family hung the white banner. The entire Swallow Dock was full of white banners. The Fang family hung the white banner because of the deep relationship between the old drunkard and the Thousand Leaves army, and also because Fang Yan and the Thousand Leaves army were both enemies and friends. The teacher hung the white banner because he deduced the truth from some unusual information. Heroes cherished heroes. How could the teacher's action not be a hero's? The other villagers of Swallow Dock hung the white banner because they began to pay attention to this matter and learned about it. Then, they respected and admired this foreign guest from the bottom of their hearts. Perhaps when they met on the battlefield, they would engage in a bloodthirsty fight to the death. However, this did not affect their favorable impression of their opponent, because they were the same kind of people. If they were not the same kind of people, why would they meet in such a dangerous place? If they weren't the same kind of people, why would they give up their lives for a goal that seemed to be empty and meaningless? They could also live in a prosperous city like thousands of people, find a comfortable job, marry a beautiful wife, and have a few lovely children. With their abilities, they could live a more comfortable and safe life. But why did they meet on the battlefield? The news of the death of the Thousand Leaves army's father spread to Huaqing, and Huaqing spread the news of the Thousand Leaves army's death to the IGA One Blade School. The IGA One Blade School spread the news of the Thousand Leaves army's death to the entire East Ocean and the even more distant world of martial artists. In the dojo of the IGA One Blade School, a long-bearded man with black silk tied around his head was silent. Several rows of young martial artists sitting across from him looked at the middle-aged man with serious expressions. Everyone, the king of our IGA One Blade School, the sword god of East Ocean, Mr. Chiba Abe challenged one of the three dragons of Huaxia, the Azure Dragon. Don't underestimate him, and unfortunately he died in the battle, the black-bearded man said in a hoarse voice. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands were clenched tightly. Boom! The crowd was in an uproar. Mr. Chiba Abe, did he really die? Impossible. How could our sword god be defeated by their Azure Dragon? He is invincible, it's impossible. He killed our sword god, we will fight him to the death. I don't want to believe it either, but this is the truth that I know. This is a disgrace to our IGA One Blade School, and a disgrace to all East Ocean martial artists. The man happened to lead the young martial artists into an emotional outburst. A debt of blood must be paid with blood. Please practice hard, everyone, and in the future, our blood will flow in the Azure Dragon. Wash the Azure Dragon with blood. Wash the Azure Dragon with blood. Wash the Azure Dragon with blood. Saka One Blade School. On the spacious dojo, A white-robed old man angrily stated this fact. Although Chiba Abe is from the IGA sect that is our competitor, the East Ocean martial artists are one family. They were bound together for glory and bound together for shame. The Azure Dragon of Hua Xia killed our East Ocean martial artists, and if we don't avenge him, we will be in vain as human beings. Everyone, please work hard, and we will challenge the Azure Dragon in the future to avenge Chiba Abe. Revenge. 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 The black-robed swordsmen waved the machetes in their hands and shouted at the top of their lungs. At the foot of Yamasaki Mountain, Koga Clan Ninja Village. Two men sat opposite each other in a simple thatched hut. One was a middle-aged man in black with several scars on his face, and the other was a skinny old man. It was hard to tell his age, but he was too old. His skin was so loose that it looked like it was about to fall off. His teeth had all fallen out, and it was difficult for him to even open his eyes. Chiba Abe has fallen. This is the death of U.S. East Ocean martial artists. The bald man said angrily. Chiba Abe has always been the totem of U.S. East Ocean martial artists, and also the hero in our hearts. Now that he has also died in the hands of the Azure Dragon of Hua Xia, our ninja clan can't turn a blind eye. I will go to Hua Xia to challenge the 3 dragons and 7 tigers. If I win, it will prove that we East Ocean martial artists are not weak. If I lose, then let me die on the battlefield. The old man opened his eyes with difficulty, and his loose eyelids almost covered most of his pupils. He carefully looked at the bald man in front of him and said, "Kakudo-kun, it's good that you can make such a choice. You are indeed the pride of us Koga ninjas. As a jonin, you need to stand up in times of crisis like this. Go and see their 3 dragons and 7 tigers. I look forward to your return. At that time, I will personally crown you as the king of ninjas. Even if you die in battle, isn't it a kind of glory?" Chiba Abe walked a path that no one has taken before, and he made a choice that we don't have the courage to make. He is a hero, the soul of our country. You too. The bald man knelt on the ground, kowtowed 3 times, and turned to leave without saying a word. Clang! The door closed and the oil lamp in the room went out with a whoosh. Do you know? Our East Ocean Sword God died in battle in Hua Xia. God, I really can't accept it. Hua Xia has 3 dragons and 7 tigers, and each of them is a 1-in-a-million master. Azure Dragon, don't underestimate your enemy. 20 years ago, he broke into East Ocean alone with a sword and fought dozens of East Ocean masters. He didn't stop conquering until he met Chiba Abe, who was equally young and talented. If it wasn't for Chiba Abe, if it wasn't for our East Ocean Sword God, all of our East Ocean martial artists would have been trampled under his feet. East Ocean swordsmen, do you have the guts? Do you still have any passion? If you are not a group of cowards, then go and seek justice for our sword god. Kill Azure Dragon, avenge. Chiba Abe's death provoked the anger and hatred of the entire East Ocean martial arts world. One after another, dojos and sects stood up. They hung Chiba Abe's portrait at the door of the dojo, and they swore to avenge the sword god. Chiba Abe became a god. After the sword god, there was no more sword god. Chapter 422. That night, several disciples of Chiba's battalion escorted his wife and daughter, Chiba Kori, to Beijing. Chiba Kori's wife was called Ozawa Wakako. She was a respectful, gentle, and beautiful woman. Chiba Kori's good looks were inherited from her. She treated the Fong family very calmly. After bowing to express her gratitude, she knelt next to her husband's body and wiped his face with a silk handkerchief over and over again. Chiba Kori bowed to Fong Yen, then knelt together with her brother, Chiba Haomu, and burned incense for their father. The beautiful and carefree girl's face was pale, and she looked unusually haggard. It was obvious that her father's death had hit her hard. It was only because of her excellent upbringing that she put away her weak and worthless tears in front of outsiders. Phantom and the other disciples became Fong Yan's right-hand men, and they did whatever Fong Yan asked them to do. There was no ill will between the two parties, as if the death of Chiba Kori had nothing to do with the Fong family. It had nothing to do with me. Fang Yen lay on the rattan chair that the old drunkard often used. He held a big bowl in his hand and drank a mouthful of wine. He really wanted to drink today, so he naturally came to the old drunkard. If we think about it carefully, the Fang family is the one who suffered the most, right? Chiba Kaori, that sly old man, lost his will to win, and he was worried about the future of the Japanese martial artists, so he came up with such a lousy move to help himself in Japan. If the news that the Japanese sword god died in your hands spreads to Japan, you will become their public enemy, and the Fang family will become their enemy. I'm afraid that every Japanese martial artist will have a new goal when they practice swordsmanship: to learn the divine skill and kill the Azure Dragon. Tell me, what are we after? The old drunkard stood in the courtyard with a wine gourd in his hand. He kept drinking, but he didn't answer Fang Yan's questions. He used his death to awaken the Japanese martial artists' desire to work hard, and used your hands to ignite their hatred. We respect him, and I do think he's a good person. But can a good person plot against others? But we didn't get anything. He didn't even give me $100. But we've done so many things for him and made ourselves the target of a country. Aren't we being too kind? We know it's not good for us, but we can't not do it. We have to do it. Why do I feel so upset? If I were to find him, he would do the same, old drunkard said in a dull voice. He was silent for a long time before he suddenly spoke. This made Fang Yen feel that the voice did not come from his mouth, but someone else was talking to them. Are you that confident? You don't believe me? Fang Yen thought about it seriously and said, he is indeed such a person. On the way back to pick him up, I suddenly realized something. Then, he stood by my side and guarded me carefully. He was worried that I would be in danger. If he had taken action at that time, I wouldn't have stood a chance. However, I wasn't worried at all. I'm a narrow-minded guy. Since when did I trust someone so much? But his son's emotions were very unstable. There were several times when I wanted to take action, but he stopped me with his eyes. I should have been the one to die, old drunkard said. You've never said something like that before, Fang Yen advised seriously. He didn't want old drunkard to die, even if he knew it would be crueler for him to live. But wouldn't there be nothing left after death? In the past, I thought I still had hope. Just like what he said, I hoped that I could find myself again and return to my best state. I hoped that she would always be there and never leave. So, I kept waiting. But now, I'm a little tired of waiting, and I'm tired of drinking. So, I want to die. I don't know what death is like. Maybe it's more interesting than living? I don't know either, Fang Yen said. But if you die, you won't have a chance to prove that you can return to your original glory. You also can't believe that she has always been there and never left. Also, Dragon God has a tough life. You can't just let him break your tendons, right? When there's a chance to take revenge, you still have to beat him up in front of everyone. Even if you don't care about any of this and let it go. What about me? Have you let me go as well? Old drunkard thought about his words for a long time, but found that he still didn't know how to answer Fang Yan's question. What do you mean I've let you go? When did I ever carry you? Besides, if he dies, you have to live, Fang Yen angrily said. You owe so much, you've pulled the hatred of an entire country's martial artists. If you die, won't they come after me for revenge? My skin is thin and my flesh is tender, how could I be their match? Old drunkard was speechless for a long time. Standing in the middle of the courtyard with the gourd in his hand, he even forgot to drink. Crack! Old drunkard suddenly exerted force, crushing the gourd in his hand into pieces. He lifted a large jar and gulped down a mouthful of wine. Then he swung the large jar and smashed it at the other jars. Clang! The two jars collided with each other, making a loud noise. He picked up the second vat and smashed it towards the other vat. Then the third jar smashed into even more jars. Clang, 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 clang. Old drunkard smashed all the jars in the courtyard. Even the new wine he brewed on New Year's Eve was smashed. Stop drinking, old drunkard breathed out like a sword and shouted. When old drunkard smashed the jars, Fang Yen understood what he wanted to do. Obviously, Chenya's death had greatly affected old drunkard. Someone didn't hesitate to die to fulfill his wish, so how could the torture he was suffering compare to that? But he didn't cheer, nor would he help. He wanted to watch helplessly as the old drunkard personally smashed these wine jars, personally smashed the new and old wine he brewed, personally smashed his current rotten and tattered life into pieces. He's been drowning for too long, he should have been reborn a long time ago. Until all the jars in the courtyard were smashed, the tiles were broken, and the wine was spilled all over the courtyard. Even the air was filled with the strong smell of burning knives, making one feel intoxicated. Good, 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 Fang Yen shouted good 3 times in a row. He jumped up from his chair and said, I knew this day would come, I've been waiting for this day, I knew you would stand up again, I knew you would soar to the sky. I knew it would be like this. The humiliation of one person is better than the humiliation of a family, and the humiliation of a family is better than the humiliation of a country. I know that the news of this battle has the effect of gathering the ambition of the Japanese martial artists and provoking their hatred. But what's there to be afraid of? Mo Qingdi ignored Fang Yan's flattery and went into an invincible performance. If I could challenge the 36 islands of the East Ocean and fight 36 East Ocean people by myself, then I can challenge the 36 islands of the East Ocean and fight 36 East Ocean people by myself again. 20 years ago, I could defeat Sword God once, then I can defeat Sword God again. 20 years later, I can kill Sword God once, then I can kill Sword God again. From now on, no one in Japanese will dare to call themselves Sword God. Fang Yen was so excited that his body was trembling, unable to control himself. Just listen, what's heroic spirit? What's heroic spirit? What's a perfect example of acting cool? From a certain point of view, Fang Yen isn't even fit to carry the old drunkard's shoes. Fang Yen was very excited, but also very self-conscious. He drank the liquor in his bowl in one gulp and loudly cheered. That's how a man should be, to match the old drunkard's heroic spirit, to match the current atmosphere. Fang Yen even sang a war song. This was a song the old drunkard taught him when he was young. Boiling blood like the waves in the river, like the waves in the sea, always stirring my heart just because the humiliation hasn't been cleared. Fang Yen sang with a high spirit, his blood vessels swelled, he sang with passion, he sang with a sense of self-satisfaction. The old drunkard waited for him to finish, then happily said, It's good that you have such ambition, the things I mentioned, I'll leave them to you from now on, dash. If I can do it, so can you, the old drunkard said. After that, he turned around and walked into the house. From now on, he would no longer sleep on the reclining chair under the eaves of the corridor or in a corner. Fang Yen stood alone in the wind and snow, his expression a little sad and melancholy. The Chiba Ministry of War was buried in peace. Ghost Shadow brought his wife Ozawa Wakako, Chiba-ku and Chiba Haomu to thank the Fang family. After hearing about the deeds of the Chiba Ministry of War, Lu Wan respected this family very much and was full of sympathy for Ozawa Wakako. She took Ozawa Wakako's hand and said a lot of comforting words. Someone next to her helped translate. Ozawa Wakako expressed her gratitude and bowed to Lu Wan again and again. In the end, she bowed so much that Lu Wan didn't dare to speak. Chiba Haomu stared at Fang Yen fiercely and firmly. After bowing deeply to him, he said, I will definitely defeat you. Slap. Fang Yen slapped Chiba Haomu's head. After that, he slapped Chiba Haomu's shoulder again and again. With a sad expression, he said in a heavy voice, You are a good boy. Don't have too much psychological pressure. Your father is gone, but your uncle is still here. In the future, I will take on the responsibility and obligation of educating you. I believe that you will become an excellent swordsman, just like your father. Chiba Haomu's face turned red because of Fang Yan's slaps, but he couldn't lose his temper, because everything the interpreter said seemed to be for his own good. Chapter 423. The sky was bright, but because of the cold weather, the snow on the ground was still hard and squeaky when one stepped on it. Fang Yen accompanied Chiba-ku on a small road in the countryside. The two of them were silent. They could only hear each other's breathing and the sound of the snow under their feet. Chiba-ku was dressed in plain clothes and looked exhausted. There were wrinkles on her knees from kneeling for a long time, and there were some ashes on her hair. The past 2 days had really tormented the girl. She hadn't even taken a hot shower until now. Are all men like this? Chiba Kaoru suddenly asked. Although she could already communicate in the Hwaseol language after a long period of hard work, there were still some obstacles when it came to talking about things that were too profound. Therefore she spoke very slowly. It was as if she was trying very hard to articulate her words. What? Fong Yen thought about it a few times before he understood her question. If there's a big country, there's no small family? If there's justice, there's no personal feelings? Chiba Kaoru asked with reddened eyes. There were many things that she couldn't understand, so she asked her teacher alone. Fong Yen was her language teacher and also the homeroom teacher of class 9. Fong Yen was silent. It was too difficult to answer. Mr. Fong, is my father really a good person? Chiba Kaoru asked. Yes, Fong Yen said firmly. He had to give a definite answer. Otherwise, the death of Chiba Kaoru would be meaningless. If he couldn't get the forgiveness of his beloved daughter, what was the point of being loved by the whole country? He's a good person and a great person. Then, Mr. Fong, will you be like him? For the country, for justice, you'll sacrifice yourself. You won't care about your wife's loneliness, your children's sorrow, and you'll say goodbye to them forever without saying goodbye? Fong Yen thought for a long time and answered honestly, I can't do it. I'm too greedy. I want to grow old with my wife. I want to be the guardian of my daughter forever. I want to take care of my parents and the old drunkard when they die. So, I won't choose that way. Chiba Kaoru stopped and looked at Fong Yen. She smiled silently, like a chrysanthemum blooming quietly in the wind. Mr. Fong, thank you for your answer, Chiba Kaoru said softly. As wives, they hope to have a husband who will never leave them. As children, they want a father who can lean on them. My father was great, but he wasn't a good husband, a good father. Fong Yen wanted to say something to comfort her, but it seemed that all words had lost their power. Don't try to comfort me, because all consolation is useless. Sadness has always been a personal thing. Chiba Kaoru saw through Fong Yen's hesitant expression and took the initiative to say, My father is gone, and my mother is going back to China. My brother will also go back. In Japan, he will receive guidance from the seniors in the dojo. My father's death will make him mature, and I believe that he will definitely become an outstanding swordsman. I will stay in Hwaseol to accompany my father. Perhaps his soul has already reached Japan, to the place he fought for his entire life, to the Pheasant Mountain where he diligently practiced his swordsmanship every morning and night. But his body is still buried here. I want to stay and accompany him. He wasn't a good father, but I still love him as much as before. Will you return to Rosefinch? Fong Yen asked. Chiba Kaoru shook her head and said, No. I knew it, Fong Yen sighed softly. Chiba Kaoru was an outstanding student and a hard-working one. Because she had just arrived and had a language barrier, she had to understand the meaning of the words before she learned any subject. She had been at the bottom of the class for the previous few exams, but she was already above average for the final exam. Any responsible teacher would not want to lose a good student in their class. Mr. Fong, I don't hate you. I didn't leave Rosefinch because I hate you, Chiba Kaoru said. I'm just afraid. I'm afraid that every time I go to class, I will think of my father when I see you. Until now, I still can't accept the fact that he has left. I can't bear that kind of suffering, and I'm worried that it will make me break down. I will leave Rosefinch and I won't enter any other school. I will learn something that interests me in the future, and my favorite is the tea ceremony. I think that's what my father is happy to see. He wants me to focus on what I like. And I always feel that I still have a lot of time. Fong Yen looked at Chiba Kaoru with sincerity and said, I respect your choice. We won't be teacher and student in the future, but we will still be friends. If you need anything, just come to me. No, you will always be my teacher, Chiba Kaoru said seriously. People in Hwaseol believe that a teacher for a day is a father for life. You are my teacher for a day, and you will always be my teacher. I understand everything you have done for my father. Perhaps Chiba Hawu doesn't understand it now, but he will one day. He will know how magnanimous he must be to be able to help his opponent like this. She bowed deeply to Fang Yen, then jogged toward the dojo. There, her mother, brother, and Phantom were waiting to leave Swallow Dock with her. They would stay in Huacheng for a short while, then fly to Japan from there. To them, it was a sad country. Her figure was thin, and her long hair was flying. Her back view was so desolate and sorrowful. She was smart, beautiful, and a girl who had lost her father. Fang Yen couldn't bear to look at her anymore, so he looked in another direction. "Hey, are you dumbfounded?" a girl with a rosy face shouted at him. No matter how bad the haze was, the sudden sight of two bright and beautiful faces would immediately brighten one's mood. This was a common problem for men. Two beautiful girls appeared in front of Fang Yen. One was wearing a white shirt, white pants, and a pair of white sports shoes. It was Yi Wen, whom he hadn't seen for a few days. The other one was Leaf, who was wearing a red down jacket, white jeans, and a pair of black leather boots. They were both young and beautiful. One was elegant, and the other was cute. They were both beautiful. Seeing Fang Yen looking at them without saying anything, Yi shouted impatiently, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Didn't you hear me? I didn't expect such a beautiful girl to like such a shameless man. There are so many idiots nowadays." Yi obviously misunderstood the relationship between Fang Yen and Chiba Q, and regarded Chiba Care's action of running away as Fang Yan's heartless betrayal of girls. Yi started her studies in Swallow Dock. Because her parents worked in Yanjing for a long time, she transferred her school registration to Yanjing City. Although she lived in Yanjing City, she often went to Swallow Dock. Her growing up was almost the history of Fang Yan's cheap deeds. The competition between her cousin Yi Ro and Fang Yen every year was the biggest drama of the year that she looked forward to the most. She had watched the competition between Yi Wen and Fang Yen since she was 5 or 6 years old, and now she had grown up watching the competition between Yi Wen and Fang Yen. As a result, she had seen Fang Yan's ugly face, all kinds of shameless expressions, all kinds of funny ways of begging for mercy, and all kinds of ways of running away. This almost subverted her outlook on life and values. Until now, she was still wondering why a man could have such a shameful side. Therefore, she wasn't talking nonsense when she said that Fang Yen was a shameless man. It was the result of watching the competition for 10 years. Moreover, because she was the most hardcore audience, she gnashed her teeth at Fang Yan's behavior every time. She was sharp-tongued and liked to sneer at Fang Yen. Fang Yen was not a man who was willing to suffer losses, and his way of fighting back made her so angry that her liver hurt. In the competition before the new year, Fang Yen ran away, which made her extremely angry. How could such a guy with no chivalry be her sister's opponent? Fang Yen was a little angry and said, "You can scold me for being shameless, but don't scold your sister. What's wrong with her liking me?" In terms of eloquence, 10 Yezi were not as good as 1 Fang Huohua. Sure enough, Yezi was ashamed and annoyed. She said angrily, "How can you be so shameless? I'm not talking about my cousin. My sister doesn't like you." "How do you know your sister doesn't like me? What if she likes me? You said that those who like me are idiots. Isn't that calling your sister an idiot?" Fang Yen said to Yi Wen, who looked calm and indifferent, as if she didn't care about anything. "Of course I know. How could I not know?" Yezi reached out and took Yi Wen's arm, saying, "My sister is such an excellent, elegant, and beautiful woman. How could she like a man with no taste, no looks, and a vicious mouth like you? Do you think my sister is blind? Only the person involved knows about this kind of thing. What right do you, an outsider, have to say such things? Okay, then I'll let the person involved tell you personally." Yezi turned around and took Yi Wen's arm, saying, "Sister, tell him. Do you not like him?" Yi Wen looked at Yezi in silence. "Sister, just tell him." Yezi showed her divine skill of acting coquettishly again. The girls of Swallow Dock didn't know how to act coquettishly, but they knew how to roll up their sleeves and fight. Yezi had lived in Yanjing City for a long time, so she learned this powerful skill. She shook her petite body and said, "Sister, say something. Say something. I want him to be convinced of his defeat." "I like him," Yi Wen said softly. In an instant, the wind stopped. the clouds dispersed, and everything was still. Chapter 424. How could he do this? How could he do this? For no reason inexplicable and sudden, why did he suddenly confess to her? Fang Yan's face was flushed, and his heart was beating fast. His hands became redundant for no reason. It was wrong to put them in front of his chest, in his pocket, and even put them vertically on both sides of his trouser legs. Fang Yan was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. Where should he put his hands? Where did he put them before? He wasn't mentally prepared at all. How could she like him? How could she like him? She was such a proud woman. She was such a lonely woman. She was such a violent woman. She beat herself up again and again, year after year. She wanted to die. She was a violent woman who had a mouth to eat but no face to see others. Fang Yan was not a fool. He could feel that Yi Gentle treated him differently from others. Whether it was when she received Fang Yingxiong's call and beat him up in front of all the students in Huaqing, or when she single-handedly challenged the Japanese sword god Chiba, she was always on his side. However, this was the style of Swallow Dock, and this was what the people of Swallow Dock should do. Just like him and Bailey Liu, the two of them would fight and kill each other when they met. If one of them was in danger or in trouble, the other would definitely fight hard to save him. Some people said that on the battlefield, the one you could entrust your back to was your brother. But in Swallow Dock, you could leave your back completely defenseless to everyone else. Oh, except for Bai Xiu. Except for Kai Dongxing. Except for Qin Keida and Li Guangwen and Gu Kite. These people either snatched Fang Yan's woman or Fang Yan's limelight. Anyway, he didn't like them. Bai Xiu snatched Fang Yan's woman and Fang Yan's limelight. Every time he saw him, he wanted to beat him up. He felt that he and Yi Rou were confidants and friends who had a tacit understanding. Why did they have a tacit understanding again? Why did he have this feeling when facing Qin Yitian? Or could it be that, as long as it was a beautiful girl, Fang Huohua would have a tacit understanding with them? Fang Yan was very distressed. He felt that he should find more girls to test if he could communicate with all the beautiful girls. More than friends but not lovers. He felt that this was the true state of Yi Rou's feelings for him. How did she fall for him? Don't you know you're making me proud? Yezi was even more surprised and unprepared. She widened her eyes and opened her mouth wide like a little fish spitting bubbles. Puff, 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 puff. After being stunned for a long time, she finally came to her senses. She grabbed Yi Rou's arm and shook it desperately. She said with a bitter face, Sister, I was wrong. I was wrong. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. You're saying this because you're mad at me, aren't you? Yi Rou looked at her calmly and did not answer her question. Sister, are you serious? Yezi stopped acting coquettishly and asked with a serious face. I'm not joking, Yi Rou said. She would never joke about matters of the heart. If she liked someone, she liked him. If she didn't like him, she didn't like him. Why did she have to cover up or deny it? That was not in line with her character. She didn't cover up. She was just not good at expressing it. He is Fang Yan, isn't he? Yi Rou nodded slightly. The man she liked was Fang Yan. Hello, I'm Fang Yan. The word Fang means square and means two fires. My name is Good, right? What's your name? He said when they met for the first time. At that time, she was 5 and he was 6. My name is Yi Rou. Yi Rou replied. While speaking, Yi Rou kicked him away because he broke the watermelon seedling she had just planted. The poor seedling was broken into 2 pieces. It looked extremely miserable under the scorching sun. Fang Yan climbed up from the melon field. His head and face were covered with dust. He spat out the sand in his mouth and said angrily, What's your name, Yi Rou? You're not gentle at all. Your little dog Yi, dinosaur Yi, bandit. Before he finished his words, Yi Rou punched him to the ground. How could an upright man talk so much nonsense? At that time, Yi Rou didn't like to talk very much. She thought most of what people said was nonsense. Why did he talk when he knew it was nonsense? It was so strange. He bullied you when you were a child. He called you ugly, the ugliest woman in Swallow Fort. He peeked at you when you were putting on makeup and put a toad in your pocket? Yi Ro said angrily. One by one, he listed all the things that Fang Yen had done to Yi Ro that were too numerous to be recorded in the book. Yi Ro smiled. She remembered all these things. Yi Fengxing, is your sister at home? Really? Really? Yi Fengxing said impatiently. How many times have I told you? She went for a walk by Stone River. She went with the ancestor. If the ancestor doesn't come back, she won't come back. That's great. Can I put this toad in her pocket? I don't think that's a good idea. Yi Fengxing, are you betraying us? Look at my face. Look at how she beat me. You can fight back. Yi Fengxing said. If I can fight back, why would I put a toad in her pocket? You keep watch for me. I'll put the toad in her pocket. Didn't you say she hates this kind of thing with thick hair all over its body? It's disgusting to touch. Yi Ruru stood by the window and looked into the room. Fang Yen tiptoed in and opened Yi Ruru's wardrobe. He was dazzled by the dazzling array of women's clothes in the wardrobe. He grabbed a coat and sniffed it. Then he put a toad in the pocket of her sportswear that she often wore. Coo, coo, coo. The toad made a few noises and jumped out of the pocket. Then, two teenagers, one fat and one thin, hurriedly tried to catch the toad that tried to escape without any spirit of sacrifice. Finally, Toad was caught. Yi Ro walked into the room and beat them up without worry. Sister, Yi Ro was very anxious and said, look at him. Thick lips, flat nose, one big eye and one small eye. Fang Yen thought about his appearance seriously and said angrily, hey, little Yi Ro, which eye is big and which is small? They're all the same, okay? Yi Ro snorted at Fang Yen and continued to criticize Fang Yan's shortcomings. She said, he's not handsome at all. He doesn't have any temperament. He's not tall or burly. Most importantly, his character is terrible. He can't beat you in a fight. Every time you fight, he will lie on the ground and beg for mercy. Once, he said if you let him go, he will recognize you as his master. Why do you like him? Sister, the man you like should have the appearance of Lu Dehua, the temperament of Tony Liang, and the self-restraint of Chen Daoming. He should wear a decent suit and drink red wine or whiskey elegantly. He should have a magnetic voice and a gentle and loving look in his eyes. Look at Fang Yen. What does he have? You're so excellent. What kind of man can't you find? Why do you have to like him? Yes, why do I have to like him? Fang Yen was also very interested in this question. Except that I'm a little more handsome than others, I don't have many advantages. Yi Ro brushed away a lock of hair on her forehead. Her voice was calm, gentle, and firm. But I just like it. Sister, Yi Ro stamped her feet angrily. She knew her sister's character. No one could change her mind once she made up her mind. It was useless to say more. So, she pinched Fang Yan's arm hard and then turned around and ran to Swallow Dock. You're so annoying. You're so annoying. Yi Ro's angry shout came from afar. Yi Ro ran away shamefully or tactfully. Then, only Fang Yen and Yi Ro were left in the boundless wilderness. Fang Yen looked at Yi Ro and Yi Ro looked back at him at the same time. She didn't hide. She wasn't shy or surprised. If it weren't for the redness at the base of her ears, it was almost impossible to find any emotion on her face. It was even more difficult to understand. She just confessed to a man. But it was as simple and common as drinking a cup of tea and eating an apple. Fang Yen looked at Yi Ro with gentle eyes and said in a magnetic voice, let's walk around? Yi Ro nodded. So, Fang Yen took Yi Ro to the rape field further away. He didn't take Yi Ro to the Stone River because it had the best scenery and the most people. When you were in love, you wished there were only you and her in the world. Crack, crack. Their shoes stepped in the snow. Because no one had ever been there, they were the first pair of pioneers. Fang Yen didn't say anything. Neither did Yi Ro. The atmosphere was dull, but they were very happy. The joy was like wheat sprouts covered by thin snow. They were not afraid of the cold and the heavy pressure. They tried their best to poke their heads out and see the new and magical world outside. Fang Yen walked a little faster and walked side by side with Yi Ro. He looked straight ahead and whispered, "Can I hold your hand?" Yi Ro didn't respond or object. Fang Yen knew that the girl's no objection was the best response. So, he stretched out his hand to Yi Ro's little hand carefully. He stretched out half of his hand and then retracted it. He reached out again unwillingly and then retracted it again. He tried several times but still couldn't hold Yi Ro's hand. He looked at Yi Ro warily and said, "If I hold your hand, you won't hit me, will you?" Chapter 425. It was not because Fang Yen was paranoid, but because he had suffered a lot from Yi Ro's punches. This woman usually didn't talk much, but she would beat someone up if she didn't agree with him. Although she said she liked him, who knew whether it was a trap or not? In the eyes of Fang Yen, a conspiracy theorist, Yi Ro deliberately said she liked him. When he wanted to hold her hand, she would fly into a rage and take the opportunity to beat him up. At that time, who could he reason with? Even if he went to Mr. Qin to seek justice, it was he who held the girl's hand first, wasn't it? The last time they met was when Qin Etian came over. The two girls fought openly and secretly, and Yi Ro suffered a little loss in front of Qin Etian. After Qin Etian left Swallow Dock, who knew whether she would keep the anger in her heart and find a chance to vent it on him? Women were all vengeful. Yi Ro stopped and looked at Fang Yen, who was standing in front of her with clear eyes. She took the initiative to reach out her hand to Fang Yen, and Fang Yen immediately made a fighting posture. "If you dare to hit me, I will fight back." "What do you want to do?" Fang Yen asked with vigilance. "Put your hand down," Yi Ro said. "You don't want to suddenly throw me away, do you?" Fang Yen still put down his hand, but his body was still a little stiff. Yi Ro took another step forward and took the initiative to put her two small hands in Fang Yan's big hands. Fang Yen exerted a little force and held that soft, warm and beautiful little hand tightly in his palm. Fang Yen was so moved that he was about to cry. He said with red eyes, "You really didn't hit me. I won't hit you in the future." Yi Ro said seriously. She was really serious when she said this. That was because she also realized that Fang Yen was very afraid of her. He was also very vigilant, as if she could beat him up at any time. Along the way, she reflected on herself and realized that she had indeed gone overboard with many things. For example, you shouldn't send him flying when he steps on his melon seedlings, because he might not be paying attention to his feet. For example, she shouldn't have knocked him to the ground and painted his face with lipstick when he peeked at her makeup, because he might not have done it on purpose. For example, she shouldn't have beaten him so brutally every time they sparred, because this hurt the man's self-esteem. A man's face still had to be protected, especially a man who loves to keep up appearances. "I'm an insecure man." Fang Yen carefully felt the smoothness of Yi Ro's palms. How could the hands of such a violent woman feel so comfortable? Compared to the time when he was humiliated by it, this was simply the difference between heaven and hell. "My family was poor when I was young, and I was always bullied by the children in the village. After that, every time we sparred, I was always the one who lost. This is the first time I've lost, and I only feel indignant. The second time I lost, I still couldn't accept it. After losing 5 or 6 times in a row for 5 or 6 years, I began to despair and felt that I might never be able to defeat you. I began to become sensitive and began to feel inferior in the crowd." Fang Yen held Yi Ro's hand, and the two of them walked on the country road like an ordinary couple. "I was very angry at that time. I was angry at you for being so excellent. Isn't it enough for a girl to be beautiful? Why do you have to be so smart? It's unnecessary for you to be smart. Why do you have such a high talent in martial arts? I felt that God was too kind to you, but it was too unfair to me. If someone told me that you were God's goddaughter, I wouldn't doubt it. Otherwise, why would God give you all the best things in the world? Do you know how much I wanted to defeat you at that time? Once I dreamed that I defeated you, and I actually woke up with a happy smile. When I woke up, I found it was just a dream, and I felt a little depressed. I thought that even if it was a dream, it should be a beautiful dream. So I tried hard to fall asleep and continue the dream, but I lost sleep." Fang Yen was wearing a green robe, while Yi Ro was wearing a white robe. Seen from a distance, the black and the white were a perfect match. At that time, I met another girl. She was very beautiful, she was very gentle, and she was very understanding. When I was sad, she would comfort me. When I was desperate, she would encourage me. When I was injured, she would clean and bandage my wounds. When I scolded you. Speaking of this, Fang Yen hurriedly glanced at Yi Ro and found that she wasn't angry, so he continued, she would also scold you with me, blaming you for beating me like this. Compared with you, I felt that she was an angel sent by God to save me. At that time, I felt that all the suffering I had endured had been rewarded. When I was sad, I would go to her. Sometimes I pretended to go to her. When I was injured, I would go to her and ask her to bandage my wounds. She would say some bad things about you. I often pretended to be injured to go to her. After a long pause, Fang Yen smiled bitterly and said, I thought she and I were a perfect match. She knew my feelings and I also knew hers. At last, I tragically found that she already had someone she liked, and I was just an insignificant person. Yi Ro held Fang Yan's hand tightly, expressing her comfort and sympathy for him. I was a failure. I felt that I was a failure of a man. For a long time, I was very sad and timid. I was a very fragile man, and I felt that I couldn't bear such emotional pain again. Since then, I have been very careful and prudent about relationships. Fang Yen held Yi Ro's hand tightly and said in a low voice, what you said just now is true? You didn't lie to me, did you? I didn't. Yi Ro also held Fang Yan's hand tightly, looked into his eyes seriously, and said, I didn't lie to you. If I lied to you, how could I get angry when I saw you with her? If I lied to you, how could I beat you more angrily every time you went to her to bandage your wounds? Of course, Yi Ro would not tell Fang Yen this secret. Looking at Yi Ro, Fang Yen tried to calm down his heartbeat and said, later, I found that you have always been by my side. Some people say that a woman is made of a man's rib. So, you must believe that there must be a woman in the vast sea of people who will love you as much as she loves her own body. Because you are her body and she is your limb. You must have a close relationship like implanted flesh and blood. In your life, there must be such a person. She will always be by your side, through thick and thin, and never leave you. For eyes met, and there were bright sparks in their eyes. Fang Yen licked his lips and said, I have one more question. Can I kiss you? Yi Ro's pretty face was smeared with a layer of peach blossom red, and she lowered her head in silence. Fang Yen held her pretty face, closed his eyes, and kissed her gently. It was soft, sweet, fragrant, and dazzling. It was a wonderful feeling. It was like a long and wonderful dream, which you indulged in and never wanted to wake up. Fang Yan's lips lingered on Yi Ro's for a while, and then he reluctantly broke away and said with a happy face, this is my first kiss. What about you? Bang! Yi Ro punched Fang Yan's eye. Caught off guard, Fang Yen fell to the ground with a miserable howl. Fang Yen climbed up from the snow, covered his golden eyes, and shouted angrily at Yi Ro, liar, all women in the world are liars. I'd rather believe in ghosts than believe in a woman's stupid mouth. You promised me that you wouldn't hit me again. What are you doing now? You're such a liar. Yi Ro stood still and looked at Fang Yen with a sneer, and said, it's your fault for saying something wrong. What did I say wrong? Which sentence? Fang Yen was like an engine that had been shut off. He suddenly became silent. He said it was his first kiss, and then he asked Yi Ro if it was. Didn't this mean that there was a second possibility? Does Yi Ro kiss any other man besides me? It seemed that he had indeed said something very stupid. How do you scold me when you're with her? Yi Ro looked down at Fang Yen who was lying in the ditch and suddenly asked aloud. Fang Yan's eyes lit up. Fang Yan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Didn't she change the topic too fast? How did she scold me? Actually, it's not really a scolding. She just said that your kung fu was too good, and you were too proud, so you bullied me. Fang Yen smiled awkwardly. Now that I think about it, maybe I was jealous of you. Think about it, a man like me was always bullied by a girl. Who could accept such a thing? What did you use to bribe Yezi? Yi Ro continued to ask. What bribe? Fang Yen asked with a confused face. How could I bribe Yezi? Yezi is your sister and your loyal confidant. What can I use to bribe her? If you didn't bribe her, would she drag me here for a walk? Would she take the initiative to greet you? Would she force me to ask if I liked you? Would she cooperate with you to put on this show? Yi Rou raised her doubts one after another. Coincidence. Fang Yen smiled and said, "It's a complete coincidence. Don't misunderstand. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll lie to you too." Yi Rou threatened. Fang Yen thought for a moment. If Yi Rou told him that she was lying when she said she liked him, wouldn't he suffer a great loss? So, Fang Yen decided to be honest and said, "I promise to give her a box of black tortoise ointment." But Yi Rou stepped on him again. Chapter 426. Yi Rou had planted 2 moles, Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan, on his side, or they might have taken the initiative to surrender, which made Fang Yen feel that he had suffered a great loss. He had also tried his best to persuade Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan to be his double spies, which meant that they seemed to be helping Yi Rou, but in fact, they were helping him. They nodded without blinking an eye. Fang Yen had completely given up on these 2 guys who betrayed him. Originally, Fang Yen couldn't bribe Yezi. Yezi was Yi Rou's hardcore fan, so it was impossible for her to betray Yi Rou and sell any information about her. Moreover, she and Fang Yen had always disliked each other. She thought Fang Yen had no backbone and integrity, while Fang Yen thought she talked too much nonsense by acting coquettishly and cute. They often quarreled when they met, and even recently, they often made sarcastic and vicious attacks on each other. However, the arrival of Qin Etienne solved this problem for Fang Yen. When Qin Etienne came to Swallow Dock to pay a New Year's visit, he brought a lot of valuable and rare gifts. One of them was Xiangui ointment, which was hard to find in the human world. The so-called Xiangui was also called the fire turtle. Its whole body was red, and it was mostly born in the sea or valley of volcanic eruptions. It was said that this kind of turtle was very spiritual. It could predict the volcanic eruption months in advance and then migrate in groups. It lived in volcanic rocks for a long time, and volcanic rocks had excellent skin care and beauty effects. Therefore, the turtle shell on its body was a pure natural beauty product. When Fang Yen chatted with Yi Fengxing, he deliberately explained the effects of Xiangui ointment in detail, and Yi Fengxing naturally conveyed this to Yezi. Yezi's mother's birthday was coming, and as a daughter, she was worried about what special gift to give her mother. How could she remain rational when she heard that there was such a thing? She begged Yi Fengxing to ask Fang Yen for Xiangui ointment, even if it was something in exchange. Yi Fengxing brought her to Fang Yen and asked her to personally discuss the deal with Fang Yen. After some intense and friendly communication, Yezi agreed to Fang Yan's small condition. Of course, Fang Yen also promised to give Yezi a black turtle ointment as a thank you gift. But he didn't expect that Yi Rou would still see through his covert cooperation. Fang Yen had some confidence in his acting skills. Yi Rou's eyes widened and her mouth opened wide like a little goldfish spitting bubbles. Her incredulous expression was at the level of a movie queen. How did Yi Rou find out? Yi Rou violently beat up Fang Yen. She stepped on Fang Yan's chest and shouted, "Tell me, do you like me?" "I like it," Fang Yen replied embarrassedly. He felt that he must have blushed because he was too embarrassed to look into Yi Rou's eyes. However, he also wanted to look into Yi Rou's eyes. He wanted to see the look on her face when she heard the answer, to see her cute expression when she was shy. How could he like Yi Rou? How could he not like Yi Rou? When you understand the truth of the matter, when you know more about this woman, when you knew that she disobeyed the arrangements of her family and accepted the duel request from the Fang family year after year, when you were in danger, she was the first to rush to the city thousands of miles away to rescue you, when you were in danger, when you saw her face filled with sorrow as she watched the tragic scene when she broke free from the net, and when those birds flew away, her expression of joy and relief, the conflicts when you were young became beautiful marks in your memory. The fights and quarrels and being beaten became the flowers blooming on both sides of your life. Every interaction was lovely, and every contact was worth remembering. When you realize that even being bullied by her became a kind of sweetness, is this the legendary arrival of love? Yi Rou blushed slightly. Then she withdrew her foot with satisfaction and said, I also want a black turtle ointment. Then she turned around and walked towards the village. She walked gracefully and briskly. Fang Yan was lying in the rape field with a happy and sweet smile on his face. All of a sudden, he felt that he had become a Superman and that he had the whole world. Yi Rou, Fang Yan shouted at Yi Rou's back. Yi Rou's body slightly paused, but she didn't look back. Yi Rou, Fang Yan shouted at the vast sky. The clouds in the sky dispersed, and no clouds stopped for him. When you like someone, you want to let the whole world know. Yi looked at Fang Yan strangely and said, Why does my sister like you? Fang Yan smiled with his eyes narrowed into slits and said, Why can't she like me? She and I are childhood sweethearts. We are the two most outstanding young men in Swallow Fort, the first and second in Jianghu. Yi sneered and interrupted Fang Yan's self-praise. She said disdainfully, What kind of childhood sweethearts are you? When did you pick green plums with my sister? When did you ever ride a childhood horse with my sister? Except that you were beaten black and blue by her, what else do you have to show off? Fang Yan was so angry that he retorted, Did your math teacher teach you Chinese? I was just making an analogy. Childhood sweethearts don't necessarily have to pick green plums and ride with each other. It can also mean that we grew up together. Your sister has seen me in open crotch pants. Have you seen it? Hooligan. Yi kicked him. Fang Yan dodged lightly and said, If you call me a rogue again, there will be no more black tortoise ointment. You dare to lie to me? Why wouldn't I dare? Fang Yan sneered. Anyway, I don't need you. You are a despicable man who breaks his promise. It's not good for your sister to know that you scold your brother-in-law like this. You are not my brother-in-law. My eldest uncle won't agree, my second uncle won't agree, my father won't agree, and my grandfathers won't agree. No one in the Yi family will agree. Fang Yan thought about it seriously and felt that Ye's words were very reasonable. He was speechless. So he looked at Yi with a kind face and said, Sister Yi, why don't you talk to your father and let him stand on my side? It was better to rope in as many people as possible. There was strength in numbers. If the Yi family held an internal vote for this matter, Ye's vote was also very important. Yi raised her head and glanced at Fang Yan, saying, Why? Fang Yan quickly took out a delicate steel box from his arms and said, This is for you. Yi took the black tortoise ointment and said, This is for me. Fang Yan handed over another one and said, This is for you too. Yi blinked her eyes and looked at Fang Yan, saying, Are you trying to bribe me? Deal. Yi nodded happily. Then can I take this box too? Yes. Fang Yan nodded affirmatively. Yi held the 2 boxes of black tortoise ointment and skipped back. Fang Yan took out his mobile phone and sent a message to Yi Rou. Honey, Yi brought the black tortoise ointment back for you. Then, Fang Yan put his mobile phone in his pocket and went back to sleep adorably. Time was like the cell phone data, used up quickly. On the 8th day of the Spring Festival, his aunt's family decided to return to Mingzhu. His uncle, Zhou Fan, would start work on the 9th, and Zhou Numerology would go back to school early on the 10th. On this trip to Swallow Dock, they had experienced far too many things, and the feelings of this family were truly too great. They had experienced life and death after being poisoned, and they had experienced the life and death of the Sword God's family. They had experienced the tragedy of almost being ruined, and they had also experienced the beauty of family reunion. They had seen the mysterious Yi family and the powerful Qin family. They also knew the connections behind Fang Yan's little nephew and the influence he could bring. The previous disdain had turned into respect, and the previous neglect had turned into respect. Fang Yijing hugged Fang Yan and said softly, Fang Yan, our Fang family has placed all our hopes on you. You have to work hard. Don't let Grandpa down, and don't let your parents down. Auntie will always support you. Auntie, don't worry. Fang Yan said with a smile. The Fang family will definitely rise again. Yes, work is more important, and you have to hurry up with finding a girlfriend. Fang Yijing said, if you can't find a suitable one in Huaqing, go to Mingzhu and find Auntie. I'll bring a group of girls for you to choose from. If you like any girl, Auntie can help you get her. Fang Yen smiled bitterly and said, Auntie, I'm looking for a girlfriend. Why do you make it sound like I'm picking girls in a nightclub? You have to go with the flow when it comes to relationships. Besides, do you think I'm someone who can't find a girlfriend? Fang Yijing patted Fang Yen and said, Don't be arrogant. Zhou Fan came over and shook hands with Fang Yen and said in a deep voice, Thank you. Fang Yen laughed and said, Auntie, we're all family. We're all family. Zhou Fan nodded and said, If you have time, go to Mingzhu and see your auntie. She's always talking about you. I'll go. Fang Yen nodded. Zhou Mingli didn't like Fang Yen, but he didn't dare to offend Fang Yen. Under the pressure of his parents' eyes, he braced himself and walked over to greet Fang Yen and said, Cousin, we're going back. Fang Yen patted Zhou Mingli's shoulder and said, Young man, you're quite spirited. Come back next summer vacation, I'll show you what it's like to split bricks in the air. Zhou Mingli was so scared that his face turned pale and he kept stepping back. Fang Yingying pushed Fang Hui out. The old man sat in a wheelchair, watching his daughter and son-in-law walk out of the courtyard with big and small bags in their hands. His smile was lonely and sad. Add a few more clothes, eat a few more mouthfuls of food, go out without mother's millet porridge, look at your face, touch your hand, then put blessings into your son's pocket. Now it's time to leave home, only then can I understand the worry of a mother who travels 1,000 miles. Chapter 427. On the 6th day of the new year, the core members of Swallow Fort's handsome men team gathered together again. They hunted 2 rabbits and a few pheasants in the back of the mountain. Zhu Ziden was lucky enough to catch a vegetable snake, and brought a few kilograms of dried mushrooms and vegetables from home to stew them in a big pot. A modified version of the dragon and phoenix fight was made. The broth in the pot was bubbling, and the fragrance made everyone swallow their saliva. Swallow Fort didn't have to worry about food and water, and they were fed well during the new year. But for some reason, no matter how good the food at home was, it couldn't compare to a big pot outside. Home flowers didn't have the fragrance of wild flowers, and fat meat couldn't compare to wild vegetable soup. Ruan Qian stood by the stove, adding oil and salt, stirring the pot from time to time with a large wooden spoon to prevent the meat from getting wet. Li Xiaotian, Zhu Ziden, and Qin Yanqing and Wang Kaixian, who had just returned home for the new year, were lying on the hay bed drinking wine, occasionally looking into the distance. What's going on with Fang Yen and Yi Fengxing? Why aren't they here yet? Zhu Ziden drank a mouthful of wine and asked in confusion. If they don't come, then they won't come. We'll finish the meat and drink the wine. If we're late, they'll have to wash the bowls. Ruan Qian smiled. Ruan Qian's words make sense. Come, brothers, let's eat, let's finish the soup. Chen Yanqing jumped up from the ground, grabbed a bowl, and was about to grab a spoon to eat the meat. Ruan Qian grabbed the spoon and didn't let go, saying, Wait, wait, the meat is still raw. Yi Fengxing is here, Zhu Ziden shouted. The chubby Yi Fengxing ran over, panting. He bowed repeatedly and apologized, saying, Brothers, I'm late. I accept my punishment. I'll drink 2 more bowls later. Zhu Ziden laughed and scolded, Brothers, did you hear that? Yi Fengxing is late, and he wants to drink more? Do you agree? Disagree. Everyone shouted in unison. Wang Kaixian threw the wine to Yi Fengxing and asked, Where's Fang Yen? Didn't you 2 come together? Yi Fengxing gulped down a mouthful of liquor and panted heavily. He didn't come with me. When I went to his house to look for him, his mother said that he went out early in the morning. You went out early in the morning? Where did he go? Everyone looked at each other. No one knew where Fang Yen was. All right, you don't have to worry about him. Yi Fengxing waved his hand and said, That kid is as sly as a fox. Even if we all die, he will still be alive and kicking, happily hugging a beauty and drinking wine. You're the one who hung up. How can you say such inauspicious things during the new year? That's right, no ivory comes out of a dog's mouth. Yi Fengxing's words caused everyone to explode, and Zhu Ziden even kicked his butt. If you took the initiative to get hit and scolded by others, then you are a brother. Those who took the initiative to beat and scold you were your enemies. He's coming, he's coming. Wang Kaixian pointed in the direction of Shihizi and shouted. Everyone looked over, and then everyone's expression became sluggish. It was as if they had seen a white rabbit and a big bad wolf holding hands. It was a funny and strange scene. This can't be real, right? Zhu Ziden asked with her mouth wide open. Our eyes must be playing tricks on us, Ruan Qian said. The fat on Yi Fengxing's face trembled, and he cursed fiercely. This bastard. Fang Yan walked over holding Yi Ro's hand and said with a smile, Sorry we're late. Everyone's gaze was fixed on Fang Yan and Yi Ro's tightly held hands. Zhu Ziden gritted her teeth and looked at Fang Yan, saying, You're not going to tell us that this is real, are you? Oh, I forgot to introduce, Fang Yan said with a smile. She's Yi Ro. Everyone's gaze toward Fang Yan became murderous. Who didn't know that she was Yi Ro? What shocked everyone was why Yi Ro appeared in front of them hand in hand. Didn't she always hit you? Didn't you hate her the most? Why did you manage to win the hearts of all the lovers of Swallow Dock? Yi Ro was a special existence in Swallow Dock. Almost all the boys of her age thought she was excellent, beautiful, and a goddess. However, no one would have the courage to strike up a conversation with her to please her. She was a goddess worshipped by everyone. The goddess should sit high up on the altar and accept the worship of the people. She walked down the altar on her own initiative and walked hand in hand with the man who was considered the least successful in their circle. Such a scene was too visually shocking. This was also the reason why everyone was so surprised but couldn't ask because of Yi Ro's presence. She's my girlfriend, Fang Yan said embarrassedly. You should call her sister-in-law. Zhu Ziden was extremely angry and said, I'm older than you. How can you call her sister-in-law? Fang Yan looked at Yi Ro with a smile and said, They all thought you were barbaric and violent before, so they don't respect you much now. Don't be angry with them. So, Zhu Ziden hurriedly greeted Yi Ro respectfully and bowed. Hello, sister-in-law. Hello, sister-in-law. Wang Kaixian and Chen Yanqing also hurriedly came to greet Yi Ro. This officially confirmed the relationship between Fang Yan and Yi Ro. Yi Fengxing grabbed Fang Yan and shouted angrily, I went to your house to find you, but you went to my house? I chatted with the ancestor for a while and drank a cup of Mao Jian tea. When Ro finished practicing, we came over together, Fang Yan said with a smile. You're not late, right? You and my sister are really together? Exactly what you think, Fang Yan said with a smile. Don't you think we're a good match? A good match. Yi Fengxing glanced at Yi Ro and didn't dare to continue. He was also quite afraid of his sister, even though Yi Ro had never hit or scolded him. Ruan Qian was smarter. He found a big bowl and scooped a big bowl of meat soup for Yi Ro. He smiled and said, Sister-in-law, it's time to eat. Thank you. Yi Ro blushed and took the bowl of meat soup. Fang Yan took the initiative to get a bowl of meat soup and sat cross-legged on a pile of licorice with a few friends. He said, The date of departure has been decided? I'm leaving tomorrow, Zhu Ziden said. To the North Sea. These years, my cultivation has been obstructed. I've been eating and waiting for death every day. This kind of life is really boring. I should have left long ago, Fang Yan nodded and said, This Swallow Dock is good, but it's too comfortable. A peaceful mind is suitable for cultivation, but a murderous mind is suitable for improving martial skills. The border is a good place. Kill a few more brats who invade our territory, and maybe you'll break through again. I'm not in a hurry, but my family has already arranged for me to go to Flower City in a while. My brother is developing in the north, so I'll go to the south. Li Xiaotian said with a smile, At that time, Fang Yan will have to take care of me. Don't worry. Fang Yan nodded and said, I'll introduce a few friends to you when I go to Flower City. Ruan Qian glanced at Yi Ro and said, Uncle Donghai is going down to train after the new year. I'll be third uncle's secretary. Lin Donghai had worked by Yi Daoling's side for many years, and now he was going to work in Jingjin City. He could be considered a daughter-in-law of many years becoming a mother-in-law. With Lin Donghai being sent down, Yi Daoling lacked a usable person. This time, he didn't choose from the Yi family's direct descendants or collateral descendants. Instead, he chose the smart and careful Ruan Qian. This also showed the Yi family's attitude. Swallow Dock was everyone's Swallow Dock. The Yi family was willing to lead everyone to a brighter and better future. Through the last incident, the Yi family was finally willing to stand up and be the leader of Swallow Dock. Everyone praised Ruan Qian, telling him to perform well and strive to become a capable person like Uncle Donghai in the future. Ruan Qian smiled shyly and said, "The person third uncle values the most is Fang Yen. If Fang Yen is willing, then I won't have a chance." "You can't say that." Fang Yen encouraged Ruan Qian. "Last time I talked with third uncle. He has a very clear understanding of your abilities. He chose you as his secretary after careful consideration. Otherwise, why didn't he use Yi Fengxing? Why didn't he use Zhu Ziden or Li Xiaotian? I will work hard," Ruan Qian said with a firm gaze. Chen Yanqing was going to take a temporary position in a city or county after the new year to prepare for future promotions. Wang Kaixin was going to study at a military academy. In the future, he was going to walk the military path like his father. Other than Yi Fengxing, the youths of Swallow Dock were about to go their separate ways. Yi Fengxing was in a very bad mood. He raised the bottle of liquor in his hand and proudly declared, "Each of you have your own path, each of you have your own place to go. I will stay at Swallow's Dock to help watch over the house. I wish you all a bright future and a bright future." Fang Yen glanced at Yi Fengxing and sighed softly. "We'll go to Yanjing again in a couple of days and have a good talk with third uncle. You have to go out for a walk. If you really can't, you can come with me to Huaqing. With everyone together, you won't have to worry about not having a bowl of rice to eat." "That's right. Why don't you come with me to the North Sea?" Zhu Ziden said. "Let's go to the military academy." Wang Kaixin grinned. "I was just worried that I would be bored inside alone." Yi Wen glanced at Yi Fengxing and said, "Do whatever you want. Ask for whatever you want. No one can help you. The only person who can help you is yourself. If you don't even have the courage to go out, how can you climb to the peak of martial arts?" Yi Fengxing was stunned for a long time. Then he happily jumped up from the ground and ran towards the village. His running posture was very strange. He looked like a big black bear running left and right. Everyone laughed for a while, feeling happy for him from the bottom of their hearts. Fang Yen raised the wine bottle in his hand and said, "A good man's ambition is to travel far and wide. Going home is to find the best girl. This separation is for the sake of a better reunion in the future. Everyone, I wish the Prince Charming team of Swallow Dock a bright future and success." Clang. Everyone's wine bottles clashed together. The melancholy of parting turned into bowls of burning knife after knife. Chapter 428. A few days after the new year, the snow on the road had mostly melted. However, an even bigger snowstorm had covered the road, covering the wheat sprouts and leaves that had just emerged from the snow. The elders of Swallow Dock shouted that the snow was a sign of a bountiful year, and that there would definitely be a good harvest this year. No matter what status they had in the outside world, they were simple and pure farmers in Swallow Dock. Kacha-kacha, the car rolled over the hard, frozen ground. Every time the tires rolled, the sound of ice and snow being crushed could be heard. These beautiful spirits were both tenacious and fragile. Fang Yixing was driving very slowly. The black Buick sedan was like a giant tortoise slowly climbing on the surface of the snow. Fang Yixing had been very busy these past few days. His art exhibition was going to be held at the glittering Jewel Hall. After Fang Yixing had given up on martial arts, he had focused all his attention on writing poetry and painting. As a result, he had always been ridiculed by the people of Swallow Dock. After so many years of hard work, he had finally achieved something in this area. It was indeed something to be happy about. If I can't become a brilliant martial artist, then I'll become a brilliant painter. Fang Yixing had a kind smile on his face. That way, I won't be embarrassed by that kid, right? You don't know, but when our old man talks about that kid, he's so excited that he can't help but sing. It's us brothers who have disappointed Master too much. That's why he has placed more of his hopes on Fang Yen. When the art exhibition is held, I'll invite sister-in-law and Fang Yen over to take a look. Wang Dong said with a smile. They'll definitely be proud of you when they see your work. Wang Dong was Fang Hui's disciple and also Fang Yixing's junior brother. Later, because he cultivated too hard, his qi was torn apart, causing his internal energy to leak out. Fortunately, he was discovered in time by Mo Qingdi, who used the great art dispersal technique to disperse the violent energy in his body through his acupuncture points and countless hairs. This saved his life. However, from then on, Wang Dong was cut off from the path of martial arts and could no longer gather internal energy. If he used too much energy, his whole body would ache. Wang Dong remained in the Fang family and became a member of the Fang family. He helped the Fang family manage some of the family's businesses. Following the paralysis of elder Fang Hui and the sudden death of Mo Qingdi, the Fang family's business plummeted. Their market share was almost swallowed up by others. Since Wang Dong didn't have a place to use his skills in Beijing, he could only work as an assistant to Fang Yixing's art exhibition. When Fang Yixing was rushing between Swallow Dock and Swallow Jing City, Wang Dong acted as his temporary driver. "Yes, we have to bring them to have a look," Fang Yixing said with a smile, but there was a desolate look on his face. "If we don't give that fellow a good shock, I'm afraid we won't be able to control him. I heard that he's dating a child from the Yi clan. Isn't he afraid that the Yi clan will break his legs? Let the children handle their own matters." Wang Dong consoled him. "If this matter really succeeds, then it'll be a match made in heaven for our Swallow Dock. In the past, I felt that Fang Yen and Miss Yi looked like a couple. The Yi family's attitude was important, but it wasn't the most important. The key is still Miss Ye's choice. Yes, I'm very satisfied with the Yi clan's daughter's appearance and character. It's just that she's too unsociable and her martial arts are a bit too high. I'm afraid that Fang Yen will be bullied." Fang Yixing thought of his son's miserable state every time he sparred with Yi Rou. He couldn't help but worry about his son's future marriage. If he married a girl like Yi Rou, wouldn't he get beaten up every 3 days and beaten up every 5 days? When it came to marrying a wife, it was naturally better to have a virtuous and loyal wife. Wang Dong laughed heartily. "Senior, there's no use worrying about this. Miss Yi is proud and arrogant. There are quite a few youngsters in Swallow Jing who like her. However, Fang Yen was able to succeed. Naturally, he has his outstanding points. Moreover, who knows if this is someone's private affair, and Fang Yen enjoys it." Fang Yixing was a bit angry. He thought to himself, could it be that my son was born to be so cheap that he likes to be beaten? But the car window was hit by a huge object, causing a muffled sound. Bang! Wang Dong slammed on the brakes. The heavy car skidded a few times on the layer of ice and snow before coming to a stop. Wang Dong didn't immediately open the car door to check. Instead, he sat in the driver's seat and looked around vigilantly. The red and white object had already slid to the ground. A shocking brownish-red bloodstain had fallen onto the car window. From the color of the bloodstain, it could be seen that the object had already been dead for a long time. "What was it?" Fang Yixing asked. "I don't know," Wang Dong said. "I'll go down and take a look." "No need. Let's go," Fang Yixing said with a serious expression. "There might be trouble." Wang Dong didn't say anything else. He prepared to start the car and leave this dangerous place. He had practiced martial arts for many years. Even though he had lost all of his qi, his intuition towards danger was still quite sharp. "It's too late," Fang Yixing said. It was indeed too late. In front of the car stood a mysterious person completely shrouded in a black robe. He appeared like a ghost, like a wandering ghost in the wilderness. Trying to be mysterious, Wang Dong clenched his teeth and started the car. He slammed on the accelerator and charged towards the black-robed person. Boom! The car ran over the black-robed person's position, but the black-robed person had already disappeared. Wang Dong didn't dare to slow down. The car maintained its high speed as it sped towards Swallow Dock. As long as they returned to Swallow Dock, or rather as long as they got close to it, they would be truly safe. He believed that no one would dare to behave atrociously in Swallow Dock. Because the ground was too slippery and the car was moving too quickly, the car's tires skidded left and right. From time to time, it would jump into a nearby ditch. Wang Dong gripped the steering wheel tightly and tried his best to control the direction of the car so that it wouldn't jump into a ditch or flip over. Wang Dong's forehead was covered in sweat and the hair on his body stood on end. His palms were also drenched in sweat as he continuously adjusted the steering wheel. They'd already sped for quite a distance, but Wang Dong was still very clear that they hadn't escaped from danger. That feeling of fear was like a shadow following the body. It was as if the mysterious black-robed person was standing behind you and looking at you with a sneer. Fang Yixing's expression was as gloomy as the color of the sky. He scanned his surroundings for the black-robed person's whereabouts. It was impossible for the black-robed person to be a specter. He also didn't believe that there were any specters in this world. There was a notorious assassin organization in the Arab world that was named after specters. However, Fang Yixing knew that the black-robed person they'd seen was definitely not a member of that assassin organization. He'd already appeared once on New Year's Eve. At that time, he'd wanted to borrow Zhou Fan's hands to take the lives of the entire Fang family. Now, he'd appeared once again. This time, he only wanted to take his life? Fang Yixing's nerves were extremely taut. He was extremely clear that the danger hadn't truly been resolved. He'd seen a lot of things in Swallow Dock, so he didn't think that he'd be able to leave the black-robed person behind just by sitting in the car. This was because there were many people in Swallow Dock who could truly start their cars faster than a car. The fact that they'd suddenly appeared and then suddenly disappeared proved that the black-robed person's speed had already reached the limit. Furthermore, Fang Yan had said that the black-robed person had escaped in order to save Zhou Fan when they'd fought. Not everyone could escape from Fang Yan's hands. Especially escaping from Fang Yan's hands. Crack! A crisp sound rang out from above their heads. The hard metal roof of the car was sliced open by a sharp blade, which pierced towards Wang Dong's head. Wang Dong's body leaned forward, avoiding the most dangerous position, which was his head. "Jump out of the car!" Wang Dong shouted loudly. The black-robed person was on the roof of the car, above their heads. As long as he wanted to, he could stab them 180 times at any time. With such a small space to move around and dodge, every stab could cause them fatal damage. He shouted loudly for Fang Yixing to jump out of the car first. After Fang Yixing jumped out of the car, he'd drive the black-robed person towards the deep ditch on the side of the road. Perhaps that way, he'd be able to buy his senior brother a minute to escape. Even 30 seconds was fine. Bang! Fang Yixing didn't hesitate. He pushed open the car door and jumped out. His body rolled on the snowy ground, then he crawled up and threw himself in the direction of the car. He didn't run away. He wouldn't abandon his brother and escape by himself. Moreover, he was extremely clear that even if he wanted to escape, his chances of success were extremely low. If he stood together with his brother and gathered all of his weak strength together, then perhaps he'd be able to struggle for a chance at survival. When Wang Dong heard the sound of a car door opening behind him, he forcefully turned the steering wheel and drove the black-robed person towards the deep ditch on the side of the road. "Don't you like to hitch a ride?" He wanted to bring the black-robed person into the ditch. Crack! Another blade pierced through the roof of the car. This time, it was still aimed at the top of Wang Dong's head. Wang Dong's body leaned towards the back seat, but because he was too slow, the blade sliced off the tip of his nose. Fresh blood violently gushed out, quickly dyeing his mouth and clothes red. His mouth was filled with large mouthfuls of blood. Even if he coughed, he'd spit out blood. He firmly stepped on the accelerator. Even if he died, he'd drag the black-robed person down. Crack! Another blade pierced through. This time, the blade was both fast and ruthless. It directly pierced through the top of Wang Dong's head. Wang Dong opened his eyes wide with unwillingness. His hands powerlessly fell to the ground. The forcefully twisted steering wheel quickly returned to its original position, emitting a whining sound. At this moment, the car leapt into the air and fell towards the deep ditch on the side of the road. Finally, he'd bought his senior brother a minute of time. Even if it was only 30 seconds, he was willing to trade his life for it. Chapter 429. The people of Swallow Dock believed that a teacher for a day was a father for life. Since Wang Dong was Fang Hui's disciple, Feng Hui was his father. Wang Dong and Feng Yixing weren't just fellow apprentices, they were blood brothers. It wasn't about whose life was more precious, nor was it about who was more qualified to live. Wang Dong had his own family, wife, and child. In the eyes of his wife and child, his life was even more precious than Feng Yixing's. His life was more important than anything else. Wang Dong was willing to fight for a minute or even 30 seconds for his senior brother. He valued friendship over life and death. This was Wang Dong's way of repaying his debt of gratitude. It was rough and deep. The black Buick flew through the air for a short period of time. Because there was a knife stuck in its head, and the handle of the knife was still clamped onto the metal roof of the car, Wang Dong's body wasn't thrown into the air. Clang! Both the man and the car fell into a deep ditch. The ditch was deep and narrow, making it hard for the car to get out of it. The black-robed man tapped the roof of the car with his toes, and his body jumped high into the air. His black robe fluttered in the wind, making him look like a flying bat. He really did look like a black animal, and his ability to stay in the air was astonishing. The black robe flew through the air for a long distance before gently landing on the ground. The mud didn't splash, the snow didn't rise, and the snow didn't leave a trace. Feng Yixing jumped very quickly, but he still couldn't catch up to the speed of the tragedy. When he jumped into the ditch, he pulled out the knife from the roof of the car and dragged Wang Dong's body out. Wang Dong's head and body were already dyed red by his own blood. His eyes were wide open, and blood flowed into his eye sockets. The whites of his eyes had also turned blood red. He was extremely unwilling to accept this. Wang Dong. Feng Yixing hugged Wang Dong tightly, helping him warm up his body that was gradually turning cold. When a person died, the heat would dissipate. Feng Yixing didn't grieve for too long, because he had more important things to do. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped Wang Dong's eyes, wiping the blood from his eyes. However, there was a large hole in his head, and it was still bleeding nonstop. Just as he wiped it clean, the blood gushed in again, dyeing his eyes red. Therefore, Feng Yixing could only force him to close his eyes. He took off his woolen coat and covered Wang Dong's head, face, and body. Afterwards, he picked up the blade that the black-robed man had used to cut open Wang Dong's skull. He tore off the tie around his neck and tied it around Wang Dong's arm. In the end, he tied his necktie into a dead knot, and the knife became one with his body. Feng Yixing stood up and stood in front of the black-robed man again. The black-robed man raised his head. The eyes covered by the black hat were as cold and vicious as those of a wild beast. He looked at Feng Yixing and said, "The people of Swallow Dock, are they not afraid of death?" "I'm afraid of death," Feng Yixing said. "It's good to be alive. No one wants to die." "Why isn't he afraid?" The black-robed man pointed at Wang Dong, who was lying on the ground. "He's called Wang Dong. He was originally a beggar. When his hands and feet were about to be broken and he became a cripple, my father rescued him from the hands of the underground beggar clan. From then on, he became a member of the Feng family. His life was given to him by my father, and his dignity was also given to him by my father. We gave him life, so he used his own method to return a life to the Feng family. We gave him dignity to live, so he chose to die with dignity." Feng Yixing looked at Wang Dong and said softly, "He's a hero." After he died, his corpse was buried in the Feng family's ancestral cave, and his spirit tablet was enshrined in the Feng family's ancestral shrine. As long as the Feng family continues to plant terminated meridians, his incense will never be extinguished. He was explaining to the black-robed man, but it was more like he was giving Wang Dong a guarantee. A hero cherished a hero. In order to save him, Wang Dong gave up his life, so he wasn't stingy in giving him the most important thing that Wang Dong cared about the most. The black-robed man muttered to himself for a long time, then said in a hoarse voice, "The dignity of living, the freedom of life, the ancestral cave, and the ancestral shrine. It's truly enviable. I don't have any of these things. A lonely ghost like me will be thrown into the wilderness or a mass grave after I die. My corpse will be torn apart and eaten by vultures or wild dogs. There's no ancestral cave to bury me in, but there's still incense to burn. No wonder he was willing to die to save you." After pausing for a moment, the black-robed man asked again, "Then, what about Zhou Fan? He's a greedy, cowardly, selfish, and cold-hearted person. The reason why I chose him was because I originally thought that he was the same type of person as me. Why did he also choose that method? He'd rather sacrifice himself than poison the soup? And why was he willing to die for you?" A proud and gentle smile appeared on Fang Yixing's face as he said in a loud voice, "Do you know what home is?" The black-robed man thought about it seriously. He really didn't know what home was. What exactly was home? Was it a house that could shelter you from the wind and rain? Was it a pile of luxurious, high-class furniture? Or was it to provide you with different women every day? Home is a family. Only when there are people can there be a home. When you get home from work, your wife will have already prepared dinner and boiled chicken soup. When you go out for business, your son will call you over and over again, asking why your father isn't back yet. The two of you will sit at the same table and eat. You will scold your son for his naughty behavior, and you will teach your daughter to study hard. Even when other children's parents come looking for you, as a father, you will stand up and apologize to them or argue with them. Fang Yixing's smile was very gentle, but his eyes began to tear up. The wife he mentioned was his wife, and the son he mentioned was his son. The family he mentioned was his family. He probably wouldn't have the chance to enjoy this kind of happiness ever again, right? You're right, Zhou Fan is indeed the type of person you described. In terms of personality, he is the same type of person as you, but he can't betray his wife and child, and he can't abandon his family and happiness. He has experienced it, and he has enjoyed it. Those who have experienced it and enjoyed it will never be like you, like an animal's way of thinking and acting. He fearlessly told the truth and saved the Fang family. The Fang family also gave him tolerance and understanding, and gave him a complete family. The black-cloaked man nodded and said, "You have taught me a lesson. What you said is something I have never experienced or enjoyed, but it is very comfortable to listen to. I don't want to give up my life, I want to try my best to live. That's why I live my life for others, to kill people." The black-cloaked man looked at Fang Yixing and said, "I respect you, I gave you a chance. Unfortunately, until now, no one has come to save you, then I'm sorry." "No need to apologize," Fang Yixing shook his head. "I don't accept your apology. You don't need to give me a chance, I don't need any chance from you. I know you came for my son, but this is even more worrying than coming for me. As a father, I don't have much ability, and when my son is in danger, I can't do much. But I have learned some martial arts before. I can't help him much, but I'll help him exhaust some of your strength." The hatred in the black-cloaked man's eyes disappeared, but his voice was still hoarse and unpleasant to hear, but he said with an extremely serious tone, "I like to torture people, but I won't torture you. You will die a quick death." Fang Yixing didn't say thank you. He wouldn't say thank you to such a person. He tightened his grip on the long saber, lowered his body, and took the initiative to charge at the black-cloaked man. Crack, crack, crack. The leather shoes on his feet stepped on the hard layer of snow, causing the accumulated snow to make crunching noises. He rushed in front of the black-cloaked man, and then slashed at his head. Mountain-splitting saber. This was the simplest and most vicious move among saber techniques. It was the saber technique of the Zhao family of Swallow Dock. After that incident, he had tried countless times, and this was only one of his countless failures. The Fang family was good at Tai Chi, and the Tai family of Tai Chi had an extremely high status in the Jianghu. But Tai Chi needed strength. Tai Chi without the support of strength was just fancy Tai Chi. Some Tai Chi experts didn't even need strength, and only needed technique to bring someone down. But Fang Yixing knew very well that with his Tai Chi cultivation without strength, facing an opponent like the black-cloaked man, the only road left for him was death. He didn't want to win, and only wanted to fight to the death. The saber's energy was sharp, fierce, and decisive. The whistling cold wind was slashed apart by this saber, and even his body became hot. Fang Yixing could only use 70% of his power in the saber, but because of the murderous intent in his heart, there was an additional power that could frighten one's soul. Whoosh! The black cloak shook, and the black-cloaked man's body flew into the air, and he started to retreat at an extremely fast speed. He actually chose to retreat. A saber with no chance of survival, a saber that would put himself in a dead end, naturally could make people feel fear. Fang Yixing only wanted to use this saber. Fang Yixing thought that he could only use this saber. The black-cloaked man retreated, and his battle intent surged once again. The long saber that was tied to his palm and arm let out a sharp sound, waiting for the moment to drink blood and seal the throat to arrive. Fang Yixing's body rushed forward, and he chased after the black-cloaked man. One retreated and the other attacked. Fang Yixing ran faster and faster, and in the end, his feet didn't even touch the ground, and his body jumped high in the air. Another saber slashed over. It was still a machete with no defense, a machete with no return. But the black-cloaked man swung his long sleeves, and a long black cloth covered Fang Yixing. Fang Yixing didn't dodge, and his saber slashed towards the black cloth. Rip! Fang Yixing's saber slashed a huge hole in the black cloth, but Fang Yixing's body was kicked away by the black-cloaked man's leg that came out from below. Thump! Fang Yixing's abdomen was hit, and his body fell onto the snowy ground, sliding backward. He slid for a very, very long time, until the inertia disappeared, and his body finally stopped. He felt a sweetness in his throat, and a large amount of blood came out. I'm not dead, and I didn't lose my saber. Fang Yixing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and the saber was still tied to his arm, and he thought, I can still slash again. Chapter 430. Cough. It trained the muscles, bones, and skin on the outside, and the breath on the inside. If there was no breath in the body, no matter how hard one trained, it would be hard to achieve the invincible body of Vajra. Fang Yixing was in such a situation. He lacked energy in his body, so he could only rely on his skin to block external injuries. Skin and flesh like tree bark, skin and flesh like steel, skin and flesh like gods. To Fang Yixing, he was only at the stage where his skin was like tree bark. If the black-robed man's kick landed on Fang Yan's body, it would only hurt a little. There wouldn't be any internal injuries. But if this kick landed on Fang Yixing, it would be enough to hurt his muscles and bones. He spat out mouthfuls of blood. One of his arms was tied with a long knife, so he could only rely on his other arm to support himself as he struggled to get up. Because he was injured and spat out blood, the heat in his body was quickly draining. His body felt cold, as if he was standing in a snowstorm wearing only a single layer of clothing. Fang Yixing tightened his grip on the long knife in his hand. He bent his body and charged towards the black-robed man again. Machete. A machete that could open wide. A machete that could only kill him. His footsteps were hurried, as though he was rushing to his death. His breathing was rapid, as though he was about to collapse. He raised his right hand high, and the cold and sharp blade slashed towards the black-robed man again. The knife just now tore through his clothes. It would be best if this knife could slice off a piece of his flesh and remove one of his arms. This was a battle of unequal strength, so Fang Yixing only wanted to injure his opponent and never thought of winning. Of course, the price he had to pay was death. This was also why he was so reluctant. Unfortunately, reality was crueler than he had imagined. He couldn't even hurt his opponent. He couldn't even touch his body. Fang Yixing's body was only halfway through when the black-robed man also charged in his direction. Before their bodies could come into contact, before Fang Yixing's saber could strike down, his body was once again sent flying by the black-robed man's black robe. Whoosh! Fang Yixing's body staggered backwards, but he didn't fall to the ground again. The black-robed man continued to charge towards Fang Yixing. As he caught up to Fang Yixing, he sent him flying once again. Then he chased after Fang Yixing again and sent him flying with another kick. Bang! After being struck repeatedly, Fang Yixing finally lost his balance. His body lay on the ground, like a huge ice ball on the ice, being pushed back and rolling non-stop. Cut! Fang Yixing stabbed the long saber in his hand into the frozen soil under the snow. The frozen ground was quickly sliced open by the blade. Fang Yixing's arm strength was not enough to stab the blade any deeper. Under the pull of Fang Yixing's body, a long straight line was formed, dang. The long blade collided with a hard rock. Fang Yixing's body stopped once again under the rock's obstruction. This time, the injury was more serious than the previous one. Fang Yixing lay on the ground and coughed loudly. Then, a large amount of dark red blood spurted out from his mouth. The blood flowed back into his mouth and into his throat, causing him to cough even more violently. The corner of his mouth was dyed red with blood, and his face was purplish red. Large drops of tears flowed down his face. Tap. The sound of footsteps came closer. The black-robed man stood beside Fang Yixing and looked down at him. He said, "Do you still want to get up? Give up, it will be more comfortable this way. I respect you. You are one of the few people I am willing to respect. Just like the person I killed earlier, everyone is afraid of death, but you are not. I respect those who can do things that I cannot." Fang Yixing wanted to say something, but the blood in his throat caused him to cough again. He coughed until his lungs were torn apart. Only when he felt slightly more comfortable did he use his 2 arms to get up. The long saber tied to his arm had cut his palm and blood flowed down the long saber. He used all his strength to sit up and then used the tip of the long saber to stand up. His whole body was in great pain and his internal organs were seriously injured. He struggled to stand up straight and raised his head to look at the black-robed man who was 1 step away from him. The long saber in his hand slashed at the black-robed man again. Bang! Fang Yixing's body was once again sent flying in the air, then heavily fell to the ground. His body was lying in the snow. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't get up. Blood was still bubbling up from the corner of his mouth as he stared at the sky, unwilling to give up. Why can't I just slash down? That damned voice appeared once more. It didn't sound like a grown man's footsteps, but more like the noise of a cat or rabbit stepping on the snow. Even his footsteps were so light that if he wanted to hide himself, no one would be able to detect him. The black-robed man looked at Fang Yixing's despairing eyes and said, "I don't have what you said, but I'm still alive." He crouched down and reached for Fang Yixing's neck. He liked to torture people, especially his opponents. But he just promised Fang Yixing that he wouldn't torture him and would let him die a quick death. Pain and fast. He was a man of his word. Chi. A red golden-striped snake scuttled to his side. After sniffing his black robe for a while, it crawled up his arm with great familiarity. It lay on the black-robed man's palm and hissed at him. It wasn't showing off, but rather acting like a spoiled child. The black-robed man stroked the golden-striped snake's head with a stiff but warm smile on his face. "I didn't think there would be a day like this," the black-robed man sighed. "You will also become someone else's snake slave, cha. Cha. The same sound as when he walked, the same rhythm. A thin figure appeared behind him. This was a man wearing a white linen robe with only 1 eye on his face. An extremely ugly man, so ugly that you'd blame the heavens for being so cruel and unfair to him. "I know it's you," the thin man said. "I've been looking for you. The way you ran, the way you hid yourself. The way you hunt, even the way you use a blade to peel off the skin of each animal before roasting it, letting the blood fill their bones and flesh. I know it's you." The black-robed man stood up with the golden-striped snake in his hand, then turned to look at the thin figure. "Just now, he asked me what my home is," the black-robed man said. "I've thought about it for a long time. The only thing I can think of is you. I think, if I had a home, it would be in Xiangxi, with you and your younger sister. A home with people is a home, and right now, there's no one at my place. My younger sister was taken away. They're using her to threaten me, making me kill for them," the thin figure said. "I can't refuse, because I only have my younger sister." "I know," the black-robed man said with a hoarse voice. "I'm leaving. You only have your younger sister. Why do you have to leave?" "Because I'm the same as you," the black-robed man laughed. His voice was even more ear-piercing. It was as if there was a small hole in the middle of his throat, and when he spoke or smiled, wind would blow in through that hole. "I've become someone's snake slave. The people of Xiangxi all worship us as kings, but our fate is just to be slaves who kill and set fires for others. And not human slaves, but snake slaves. We don't deserve to be human." Who can catch you? Who can catch me? The black-robed man laughed even more exaggeratedly. It was so unpleasant that people wanted to cover their ears. We're just monsters covered in poison. Compared to those big shots, what are we? As long as they have the heart, as long as they have the need, we can become their prey at any time, just like how they can throw ferocious tigers and swift cheetahs into a hunting park for people to hunt at any time. The difference between us and those tigers and cheetahs is that we're tools to help them hunt. A long time ago, when you taught me how to raise snakes, you knew this would be your fate, right? Yes, the black-robed man said without hiding anything. My master is also someone's snake slave. I thought I was an exception, but I'm not an exception. I hope that you could be an exception, but you're not an exception. Perhaps there will never be an exception. The skinny man pointed at his empty eye socket and said, I gave my snake eye to him, so you have to work for him. The black-robed man nodded in understanding. If you don't work for him, he'll crush your snake eye and make you bleed to death. If that happens, you won't be able to save your sister? Yes, the skinny man said. My mission is to protect him from harm. So I can't let you kill him. If he dies, I'll die too. My sister will die too. I've searched for you for so long, I've chased you for so long, lost you countless times, and then tried my best to find you again, because I'm worried that you'll kill someone. I'm worried that you'll kill the person I want to protect. The black-robed man pondered for a bit, then took off the black robe on his head. His hair was as messy as a pheasant's nest. Some were sticking close like cow's hair, some were sticking up like weeds. The left side of his face was slashed with countless cuts that crisscrossed each other in a disorderly manner, like a spider web that caused one's heart to palpitate. There was a sarcoma on the right side of his face, a brownish-red colored sarcoma. There were also countless tiny holes on his face, as if a terrifying monster was living in each of them. Similar to the skinny man, he also had a single eye. He didn't have a name, but those who knew him called him the Snake Lord. He was the previous Snake Lord, the current Snake Lord's master. Chapter 431. If the current snake monarch was ugly, then the previous snake monarch, the black-robed man, could only be described as disgusting. Some people would become infatuated just by looking at them, while others would vomit just by looking at them. Without a doubt, the black-robed man belonged to the latter. The brown sarcomas on his face and the countless deep holes made it impossible for anyone to look at his face for too long. That was the cruelest punishment for oneself. If the police asked you if you wanted to confess, and if you didn't confess, they would drag the black-robed man in and force the suspect to look at his face for half an hour. Wouldn't that be even more effective than using a blinding light? There was indeed a dark scar on his throat, but it was hidden by the shadow when he wore his hat, so it was hard to see. Perhaps this was the reason why he sounded like he was being torn apart when he spoke. The black-robed man looked at his disciple and smiled. Look, I only have one eye, and I've also offered my snake eye. I'm a snake slave, so I have my own mission. The black-robed man pointed at Fong Yixing, who was lying motionless in the snow, and said, My mission is to kill him, as well as a few others. There are others, that is my task. The skinny man's expression changed. You're my Shifu, you saved me, you raised me, everything I have was given to me by you. I don't want to stand in front of you, I don't want to clash with you. But Shifu, you can't kill him. If you kill him, I'll have to die. If I die, my younger sister will also die. I can die, but my younger sister can't. So, in your heart, your younger sister is more important than Shifu? The black-robed man asked softly, like a kind elder talking to his own child. He had never spoken to anyone with such a tone, except for his disciples standing in front of him. The skinny man seriously thought about it, then replied, Yes, I originally thought that Shifu should be more important, but in my heart, my younger sister is more important. The black-robed man laughed. His laughter was as unpleasant as ever. She is your younger sister, and also your only companion. You're in love. You don't know, do you? The skinny man uttered these two unfamiliar words in bewilderment. He didn't know what kind of feeling it was. Or was it a state? There's a saying in ancient times that kings don't see kings. When the previous monarch died, the next monarch would be appointed to take over. Only when the previous snake monarch dies will the next snake monarch be born. The black-robed man looked at his skinny disciple, the only person he still cared about in this world, and said, "That's why I knew you were tracking me, and I didn't want to see you. I used all kinds of stratagems to lure you somewhere else, and let you walk into one trap after another. I didn't expect that you would still find your way here. This is something I don't want to see." The black-cloaked man said, "Since this matter has already been discovered, you and I have no other way out. Master, I beg you," the skinny man begged, "please take a step back. If we take a step back, no one will die." He didn't want to kill his master. How could he kill his own master? He ran away with his sister. They were like birds that were startled by the mere twang of a bowstring, trying to avoid any strangers. At that time, they felt that everyone in the world was bad. They ran to the lonely places, they ran to the dark forest. They were trapped in the poisonous swamp, unable to escape. They could only hold hands and silently wait for death. "Who are you people?" A voice suddenly rang out. They were terrified, looking around, but couldn't see anyone. They thought that it was a mountain ghost, because they had heard stories about mountain ghosts countless times in the orphanage. After the fat director beat them up, she would always shout with a high-pitched voice, "If you dare to say a single word, I'll throw you into the mountains to feed the mountain ghosts." She said, "Feed the mountain ghosts. So does that mean the mountain ghosts eat people?" "We're orphans," the younger sister shouted. After a while, a vine descended from the sky and pulled the two of them out of the swamp. "Come with me," the man in the gray robe said with his back to them. He felt that the man was very dangerous, but also very close and happy, because he was the only living person they saw in the forest. The only human who said, "Come with me," to two young orphans. Since when can a snake slave choose their own fate? The black-robed man gently consoled him, "Come, let me see how much you've improved over the years. Let me see whether or not you're qualified to become the new ruler, master." The skinny man called out sorrowfully. Father and son killing each other, master and disciple killing each other. This must be the cruelest thing in the world, right? They didn't care about feelings because they had never experienced them before. To them, a person with feelings was as important as their own life, because that person might be the only one they had. The black-robed man let out a soft whistle. The golden snake that was lying on the back of his hand and acting cute suddenly became agitated. It opened its sharp teeth and leaped towards the skinny man. Snakebite? This snake was raised by the current snake monarch, so it should be under his control. But now, it was ordered by the black-robed man to attack the current snake monarch. To be bitten to death by a poisonous snake raised by oneself, would it not become a laughingstock in the snake world? The current snake monarch knew of his master's strength, so his expression was extremely serious. He immediately put 2 fingers to his mouth, and a more urgent, gurgling sound came out. The golden snake that was flying in the air landed awkwardly, then turned around and counterattacked the black-robed man. The black-robed man had a strange smile on his face, and his voice was slightly forceful. At the same time, he stretched out his hands from the black robe and waved them in the air, as if he wanted to chase away the golden snake that was rushing towards him. This was a medicinal fumigation. The black robe had 100 insect powder that poisonous snakes were afraid of. An adult cobra king, a crimson fire centipede, a 17-segmented rattlesnake, and nearly 100 other poisonous creatures were refined together and then mixed with a secret recipe. Finally, it became a powder that even a king of poison like the golden snake was afraid of. Using the sole control of the snake voice, supplemented by the 100 insect powder, the golden snake could only be used by the black-robed man. The effect of the black-robed man's stirring was very obvious. The golden snake that was crawling towards his feet was very afraid of him, so it turned around and fled into the distance. It was as if it had seen its natural enemy. The black-robed man waved his hand and stretched out 2 fingers, pointing in the direction where the current snake monarch was standing. The tone of the voice coming out of his mouth also changed. It was just a light and casual shoo just now, but now it became a passionate snake fighting song. The golden snake that wanted to retreat from the battlefield had bloodshot eyes, and the golden lines on its back were even brighter and more dazzling. It struggled and jumped on the spot as if it had taken a stimulant. It supported itself with its body, raised its head high, and stuck out its scarlet tongue, ready to devour its prey. Under the guidance of the black-robed man's fingers, it began to adjust its direction and scuttled towards its master, the current snake monarch. Its body jumped again, so fast that it was like a phantom. The current snake monarch bit his finger and let the blood spurt out. He smeared the blood on his palm, then reached out to capture the snake slave that had betrayed him. The most poisonous thing was not the powder of the 100 insects, but the blood of the snake monarch. Since the snake monarch had been raising poisonous snakes and all kinds of poisonous creatures since it was young, its body had the smell of hundreds of poisonous creatures, and its blood was also a collection of all kinds of toxins. Such a smell and toxins made the poisonous snakes that the snake monarch had raised feel close to and afraid of. Moreover, every poisonous creature that the snake monarch had thrown out to carry out a mission had eaten its fill of the snake monarch's blood. This kind of blood made them like it, but they didn't dare to approach it. The golden snake hissed and forcibly turned around in the air. After landing on the ground, it pounced towards the black-robed man. The black-robed man's snake-fighting song became even sharper, as if someone was blowing a loud, monotonous whistle. In this harsh winter weather, the current snake monarch's face was covered in sweat. The Gigi sound from his mouth was getting louder and faster. In the end, it became one, and you could no longer hear the Gigi sound. Instead, you could only hear the monotonous Gigi sound. He bit a few more fingers, and the blood from his fingers continued to flow out, smearing a layer of blood all over his body. His whole body had turned blood red. The golden snake had become a brainless snake. It darted towards the black-robed man one moment, and then bared its fangs at the current snake monarch the next. It had just pounced on the current snake monarch, but in the blink of an eye, it turned around and attacked in the opposite direction. Its eyes were getting redder, and the red line on its body had become a raised golden line. It was as if he could peel that line off its body with just a stretch of his hand. Left again. The black-robed man exerted force, and so did the current snake monarch. The current snake monarch kept bleeding, and the black-robed man kept fanning the flames. Both of them used their ultimate moves and skills. The golden snake suddenly shrank in the middle and stopped moving, as if it was extremely tired or about to sleep. However, the current snake monarch and his master, the black-robed man, were still driving it. Pa! A strange muffled sound was heard. The golden-striped snake, which they had been controlling and darting left and right, exploded like a bomb. Flesh and blood splattered, turning into visible fragments. The snake's blood dripped on the snow, causing it to sizzle and emit a white smoke. The snake fighting dance, 2 generations of master and disciple. The master was old and firm, and the disciple was young and strong. Chapter 432. Some people said that the more you read, the more confused you will be. Lu Wan obviously didn't belong to this category. She was born in a scholarly family. Her parents and even her maternal grandparents were all very famous scholars. Since she was a child, she had been with Tang, Song, Ci, Jing, and Shizi. She could be considered the type of person who was well-read and knowledgeable. She fell in love with the handsome and elegant Fang Yixing and married him. Then she lived a quiet life of studying and writing. The Fang family had gone through too many hardships in these years. As a woman, she had to stand up and help with the housework of the Fang family. She had to bear too much responsibility and was looked down upon. She looked gentle, but her heart was firm. She had never believed in ghosts and gods. But today she felt restless. She always felt that something important was leaving her, but she couldn't figure out what it was. "Have you seen Fang Yan?" Lu Wan asked. Her first reaction was to wonder if something had happened to Fang Yan. Because since he was a child, she had been worried about this precious son. She knew that her son did very well in Huaqing, but she also knew that her son seemed to have provoked some big shots. Fang Yixin, the eldest aunt, put down the cloth sole that she was making and said, "I just saw him go to the backyard. He was either chatting with his enemies or playing chess with the old man. This child has really grown up. He looks calm and reliable. He doesn't go out to play after the new year. Now he is in love with the girl from the Yi family. Will the wedding be held next year?" Lu Wan was a little relieved. As a mother, she couldn't find any fault with her son, Fang Yan's behavior. She felt sweet when she saw him every day. She even went to sleep with a smile. Everyone said that the hope of the Fang family was in Fang Yan. She didn't have any opinion on this. They said that Fang Yan was the hope of the Fang family. Wasn't it a disguised praise for the excellence of their own son? He is not a child anymore. Can he go out to hunt rabbits and birds like before? The marriage with the Yi family is still far away. Who knows what the Yi family thinks? But in a few days, I have to go to the Yi family to find Wenruru's mother. It will be good if she succeeds. I will send them a pot of tea. Lu Wan said. Lu Wan made a pot of the best sparrow tongue and sent it to the backyard. As expected, Fang Yan was playing chess with the old man in Fang Hui's cottage. Fang Hui made a wrong move and was clamoring to take it back. Fang Yan pressed on the chessboard and disagreed, saying that one should not regret a move. The old man and the young man were arguing fiercely. Lu Wan put down the teapot and persuaded, "Fang Yan, let your grandpa, let?" Who asked him to give way? Fang Hui said with his eyes wide open, "I'm just getting old and my eyesight isn't good. I accidentally put the stone in the wrong place. He just needs me to put it back. What are you giving in for?" Lu Wan knew Grandmaster Fang's temper. He was stubborn and old-fashioned. Sometimes he was like an old urchin. Hearing that he was unwilling to admit that Fang Yan gave way, Lu Wan echoed, "That's right. The stone was so small and the line was so thin. Who said he could see it clearly? Fang Yan, ask your grandfather to put that chess piece back on the board." Fang Yan poured a cup of sparrow tongue for his grandpa and then poured one for himself. He drank it all in one gulp and said, "He can't see it clearly?" He could clearly count the number of feathers on the Vajra eagle's body. This game of chess is waiting for the opponent's carelessness. If he makes a mistake, he will take back his move. How can I beat him? I said it wasn't carelessness. My eyesight was bad and I couldn't see it clearly. Don't regret a move. Do you have any chess skills? I'm your grandpa. You said I have no chess skills. Do you have any moral character? Lu Wan shook her head and walked out of the cottage alone. She knew that the old man rarely talked. He would only be particularly happy when his grandson came back. Fang Yan also understood the old man's feelings. He took advantage of the few days he was at home to stay by the old man's side. The grandfather-grandson pair had a close relationship. Lu Wan thought of her husband again. He and her son were the two people she cared about the most. Her husband had been busy with the art exhibition in Yanjing recently. It was the field he had put all his effort into after he gave up martial arts. He always wanted to prove himself. No matter what, this was the most likely chance for him to succeed. Lu Wan thought for a while and dialed her husband's number. No one answered the phone. Lu Wan then dialed Wang Dong's number. No one answered the phone. Lu Wan felt more uneasy. She hurriedly dialed the number of the person in charge of the Linlang Guild Hall. Lu Wan explained the purpose of her call. The person in charge told her politely that Mr. Fang had left for an hour. He probably hadn't reached home because the road was not smooth. He hoped that Lu Wan wouldn't worry. Lu Wan was very worried. She hung up the phone and ran to the backyard. She looked at Fang Yan, who was playing chess, and said, "Fang Yan, your father hasn't come back yet?" Fang Yan held a stone in his hand and said, "Did you call him?" "I couldn't get through." Lu Wan said, "I'm very worried." Fang Yan put down the stone, walked over and put his arm around his mother's shoulder. He said with a smile, "My father is an adult, and Uncle Wang Dong is with him. Don't worry, nothing will happen. If you are worried, I can drive to find him." "Go and pick him up," Lu Wan said firmly. "Whatever you say, it goes. I'll go and pick him up now." Fang Yan said with a smile, "You play this game with my grandfather for me. Don't let him go." Fang Yan patted Lu Wan's shoulder, pushed the door and went out. Lu Wan sat where Fang Yan had just sat. She held a stone in her hand but couldn't put it down for a long time. She looked restless. Clatter. Feng Hui reached out to mess up the game in front of him. He looked at Lu Wan and said, "That guy is afraid that you will worry, so he wants you to play chess with me to distract yourself. Since you can't be distracted, go and do what you should do. It's not shameful to worry about your man." Lu Wan stood up and walked outside quickly. Fang Yen pretended to be calm in front of Lu Wan. But after he came out, his expression became serious and anxious. He took out his phone from his pocket and dialed his father Fang Yixing's number. No one answered. He dialed Wang Dong's number again, but no one answered. He immediately dialed another number that he remembered in his mind, but no one answered. Fang Yan's heart was beating very fast. He ran into the garage and drove the Hongqi car towards Yanjing City. Fang Yan drove with one hand and dialed Fang Yixing's number with the other. No one answered. No one answered. Still no one answered. Fang Yan became more worried. He threw his phone aside and started to concentrate on driving and thinking. What had happened? Who was it? They failed to use poison in Swallow Dock, so they chose to do it in Yanjing City? Or were they on the way back? It was very possible that they did it on the way home. They were far away from the eye-catching places in Yanjing City and the holy land of Swallow Dock. If they were clean, they could cover up after killing the people. No one would be able to find any traces of them. Swallow Dock was a glorious place, but it was also a place that was destined to be forgotten by the world. In order to prevent people from looking at it, there wasn't even a proper road. The road to Yanjing was rugged. After being covered by ice and snow, it became as smooth as a mirror. Driving on this road, one had to be careful of the protruding rocks that would burst the tires, and also be careful of the mud that would sink the tires. One had to be careful of the cars sliding on the ice and into the deep ditches on both sides. This was a dangerous journey. If one's driving skills weren't good enough, he wouldn't be able to drive on this road. Fang Yan drove the car as fast as he could. Those deep ditches and rocks were thrown to one side. His sharp eyes scanned the front and his ears twitched slightly. He took in all the movements in his surroundings. His head leaned forward slightly, which showed his impatience. He hoped to reach Yanjing City as soon as possible or pick up his father as soon as possible. Nothing must go wrong, nothing must go wrong, nothing must go wrong, Fang Yan muttered in his heart. Boom! The body of the Hongqi car sank, and the hard road quickly collapsed. This was a trap. The enemy had hollowed out the bottom of the road, leaving only a thin layer of road on top, which was covered with ice and snow. When Fang Yan's Hongqi car rolled over, the layer of soil and ice was immediately crushed. When Fang Yan felt the car sinking, he already knew something was wrong. He didn't fasten the seat belt when he got in the car, which made it easier for him to escape. He pushed the door open, his right foot tapped on the chassis of the car, and his body jumped high. Clang! The Hongqi car fell into the deep pit with a loud noise. This was the only antique car that Feng Hui had in his life, and Fang Yan's favorite car, was finally destroyed. Whoosh! A crisp sound came through the air. A giant net appeared above his head. The net was colorless and blended with the color of the sky. If it wasn't for the slight sound, it would have been hard to notice it. Moreover, the net wasn't cast by human hands, but was shot out by high-tech equipment. There was a pit below and a net above. Whether Fang Yan continued to fly up or quickly fell down, the result would be captured by them. Moreover, the area of the net was very wide. Whether it was to the left or to the right, Fang Yan was always within its coverage for a limited period of time. These people had calculated all the ways that Fang Yan could retaliate and were thinking of ways to capture him. Whoosh! The thin silk that looked like a fish net covered Fang Yan's head, forcing him to land on the ground. From the deep ditches on both sides of the road, countless people in black jumped out and surrounded the place where Fang Yan was about to land. Chapter 433. The threads of the net were extremely sticky. It would be very difficult to escape. The top of Fang Yan's head was covered by a giant net, and his feet were the pits they had set up. It was extremely dangerous to go up or down. The front, back, left, and right paths were all difficult for him to quickly escape the encirclement. Countless men in black were rushing in this direction. Only death awaited Fang Yen. This was the most dangerous moment for Fang Yen. The more dangerous it was, the more he had to stay calm. Because any moment of carelessness could cost him his life. The heart of Tai Chi spun rapidly, and the Tai Chi domain fully unfolded. The entire world suddenly became quiet. The wind stopped blowing, the snow stopped falling, and those people stopped moving. The originally transparent net turned into red lines, which were clearly visible in Fang Yan's mind. The densely packed horizontal and vertical lines intersected, extending infinitely outwards. It seemed that there was no boundary. Flames flickered on the red lines. It turned out to be an electric net. When it completely enveloped Fang Yan's body, the electricity that erupted in an instant could stun or even kill him. The Tai Chi domain was a divine domain. Mountains, rivers, cattle, sheep, people, and even flowers and grass were all under the control of gods. In the Tai Chi domain, Fang Yen was the true king, a god. He was faster than the net, and his killing moves were fiercer and fiercer than those of the men in black. Fang Yen raised his speed to the limit and pounced on the group of men in black like a tiger pouncing on sheep. Whoosh! He grabbed the neck of a man in black, who was still in a charging posture. He could see the shock and disbelief on the man's face. The man in black didn't understand. There was clearly some distance between them, and he had already calculated the time to make contact. Why did he grab his neck in an instant? Fang Yen directly twisted his neck. When the man in black lost gravity and slowly collapsed to the ground, Fang Yen had already rushed to the second, third, and even more men in black. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of beans exploding rang out incessantly. The sounds merged together to form a single sound. If someone's eyes could keep up with Fang Yan's speed, then they would be surprised to see this extremely strange scene. A group of black-clothed men stood still in various charging positions, and Fang Yen was like the Grim Reaper harvesting lives in front of them. Every time there was a crisp sound, a life was lost. The sound stopped, and Fang Yan's figure disappeared. Pitter-patter, the men in black fell one after another. Shwa! The electric net that gave off the feeling of falling rapidly descended slowly, covering the man in black lying on the ground. Then, it let out a crackling sound. Bang, bang, bang. The men in black who had fallen to the ground were struck by a strong electric current. Even though they were no longer breathing, their bodies were still bounced up and down by the electric current, as if they were performing a zombie dance. Kacha, kacha, kacha. Their falling or bouncing bodies triggered the installed mechanisms on the ground. One by one, the mechanical feet bounced open, making a painful sound. Fang Yen stood outside the net. The prey had become the hunter now, and he coldly watched everything that was happening in front of him. Those people, they deserved to die. A middle-aged man in blue walked out. He was not tall, but he had a clear temperament. His temples were slightly protruding, and he seemed to have a reserved aura. He did not even look at his companions in black in the deep pit, but only looked at Fang Yen with a burning gaze. He said, "I know those people can't stop you. How can a true master be defeated by a broken net and a few feet? Heide? Sometimes, technology is also very powerless. What you just showed, was it the legendary heart of Tai Chi? The feeling of stopping time, it's really enviable." Fang Yen did not respond to the man in blue's question. Instead, he took the initiative to rush toward him. He had lost contact with his father, and every second he wasted was a second of time to save him. He just wanted to finish the battle as soon as possible, no matter who was standing in front of him. Words had no power, and a battle of strength was the only battlefield. "You can call me." As the man spoke, he had already thrown out 13 punches. His green robe suddenly swelled up by the force of qi. Because it couldn't bear the burden, it was pulled into pieces and floated in the air. Fist King Jin Haidong. Since ancient times, Hua Xia martial arts had the saying of Southern Fist and Northern Kick. Jin Haidong, the Fist King of Southern Fist, became famous more than 20 years ago. His pair of thunderclap fists had the power of the Yangtze River, and it could decisively break through the opponent's defense. Even the imperial advisor, Li Zhongwu, said that his hard body skills were invincible. Fang Yen did not expect that he would actually run into such a difficult opponent at this time and place. However, whether it was the Fist King or the Cannon King, whether it was invincible in hard body skills or the best in soft body skills, Fang Yen wanted to take them down. Because he was hateful. Anyone who stopped him from saving his father was extremely hateful. It was a life and death feud. Jin Haidong's 13 punches turned into 13 cyclones, one cyclone after another. The second cyclone merged with the first cyclone, and the third cyclone merged with the first 2 cyclones. Finally, the 13 cyclones merged into one, turning into a huge rotating storm. Whoosh! It was like the most violent hurricane, sweeping toward Fang Yen. It was a fierce stance that wanted to swallow him up in the storm and tear him into pieces. This was the storm fist that Jin Haidong was best at. He had watched from the side how Fang Yen killed more than a dozen men in black in an instant at that critical moment, so he did not dare to slight Fang Yen in the slightest. The best way to respect an opponent was to use one's most powerful move to kill him. The golden thread snake's body exploded, and the black-robed man and the current Snake King lost a tool to fight in the middle. The current Snake King was drenched in sweat, and his body was also smeared with his own blood. But the black-robed man was very calm, as if he had done something insignificant. The black-robed man looked at his disciple and said, "The golden thread snake shouldn't have died. It was a snake slave that you raised. Both emotionally and physically it was closer to you. When you saw it being controlled by me, you became anxious and wanted to take back control. Your soul rush area was too hasty, and the more hasty it was, the more it would stimulate the snake's bestial nature, causing it to lose its ability to judge. It lost its ability to judge and began to approach me. Caught between a rock and a hard place, its blood stagnated and it exploded and died. The current Snake King was ashamed and said, 'Thank you, Shifu, your disciple has learned much. That's already very good,' the black-robed man chuckled. 'I left without saying goodbye. You were still young at the time. After all these years of bitter training and living with hundreds of insects, it's already very good that you could achieve such results. You are talented and lonely. This was the key to your success. Thank you, Shifu.' The black-robed man waved his hand and said, 'I am your Shifu and also your opponent. With the golden thread snake dead, there is no longer anything between us.' 'What a pity!' Shifu, the current Snake King called out. The black-robed man's black robe silently fluttered and drifted towards the current Snake King. Every time he shook his black robe, wisps of white smoke drifted out of it. The white smoke moved with the wind, enveloping the current Snake King. Wandering powder. No matter if it was a venomous snake or a ferocious beast, they would die upon contact. Humans would not be spared either. Snake breeders would have countless strange poisons on their bodies. The current Snake King didn't dare to be careless. His small body turned into a sharp arrow, avoiding the white smoke's range of attack, then leapt up and attacked the black-robed man's upper body. The black-robed man's black robe instantly spread out and covered the current Snake King's body. And so, the 2 snake apostles disappeared into the black robe. The black robe's shape was constantly changing, sometimes round, sometimes square, sometimes vertical, sometimes jumping. Bam! A figure was thrown out from the black robe, screaming and rolling on the ground. The current Snake King's body was drenched in blood. His head and face were covered in reddish-brown ants. The current Snake King desperately swatted at those ants, but the ants' grip was extremely strong, and their teeth were hooked, each bite deeply piercing into flesh. The current Snake King could only reach out and grab those ants from his face one by one, squeezing them until they exploded. Every time he grabbed an ant, it was the same as ripping off a piece of flesh from his face. When he was done, there wasn't much skin left on his face. A large amount of skin was torn off, and blood began to flow from the missing parts. The current Snake King's entire face was covered in blood, his flesh becoming indistinct. The black robe unfurled, revealing the black-robed man's ugly face once again. He looked at his disciple lying in the snow with pity in his eyes, saying, "You should have died already, but I couldn't do it. Is it because of that man's influence?" He looked into the distance, where Fang Yixing's body was lying motionlessly, covered by the wind and snow. Home is family, and having someone waiting for you is home. That man had said this before. He had wandered around his entire life, and everyone avoided him like they were snakes or scorpions. However, there was a time in the depths of his memory where there were two thin black shadows waiting for him at the entrance of his courtyard every time he returned. Perhaps that was his family? That feeling of being waited for, was that the feeling of happiness? The feeling of being alive? It was precisely because they had experienced such happiness that both Fang Yixing and Wang Dong were brave and fearless, even willing to fight with their lives. This was because they cared too much about their lives and the opportunity to live, so they weren't afraid of death. Because they didn't want to die, they weren't afraid of death. It was very contradictory, but at this moment, the black-robed man felt that he had understood. Chapter 434. Fang Yan had seen the person with the most majestic spear momentum was Mo Qingdi, and the person with the most dangerous sword momentum was Chen Yebing. Today, he saw the person with the most explosive fist momentum. Every weapon, when used to the extreme, could unleash equally great lethality. For example, a pistol and a cannon. Of course, this was just a saying. This saying was only limited to cold weapons. For example, in Gulong's novel, was Xiao Li Fei Dao's knife faster or Shimin Chue Shui's sword faster? This kind of question would definitely make people scratch their heads. Boom! The storm fist lived up to its name. It was shaped like a hurricane with faint thunder. The fist wind sucked in the surrounding cold air and snowflakes, forming a layer of frost around the huge arc-shaped wind formation. As fast as lightning, it swept towards Fang Yan with an unstoppable momentum. Fang Yan didn't even have time to make a move to neutralize it before he was sent flying by the hurricane. Fang Yan's body soared into the air and flew backwards. Bang! His feet landed on the ground. The hurricane hadn't completely dissipated, pushing him backwards. The soles of Fang Yan's leather shoes stepped on the ice and snow, deeply embedded into the road. The soles of his shoes rubbed against the road, making a sizzling sound. Fang Yan used Thousand Caddy Fall to stop his backward momentum, and then he regained his footing. The soles of his feet were burning with pain, but a wave of ice-cold sensation invaded the place where the pain was. Only then did Fang Yan realize that the soles of his shoes had been completely worn through, and his feet were standing on the gravel road. Seeing that Fang Yan hadn't been knocked down, Jin Donghai didn't panic. Instead he laughed and shouted, "Awesome! In 20 years, you're the only young man who could take my storm fist. Take another punch." As Jin Donghai spoke, his body once again clenched into a fist and rushed towards Fang Yan. His right hand clenched into a fist and directly smashed towards Fang Yan. His right arm suddenly became much thicker, and his exposed fist was crimson red. The buttons on his sleeves burst open, and his fist made a hissing sound, as if it was about to ignite. This was the leaving fire fist, a domineering punch. If one were to say that the storm fist had a soft and moist side, then the leaving fire fist would be the representation of extreme yang. There was no return, and there was no return. His fists were like flames, intending to incinerate all obstacles into ashes. This time, Fang Yan really respected Jin Donghai, the Southern Boxing King. Not because of his character, but because of his skills. Fang Yan could understand why a person could practice a fist technique to the peak, because he felt that he was that kind of person. However, to be able to practice two completely opposite fist techniques to the peak, this was not something that could be achieved by talent alone. Respect didn't mean love. Fang Yan spread his legs apart, displaying the drunken crane riding the wind footwork that he learned from the old drunkard. Drunken crane rides the wind, moving as he pleased, ethereal and formless. It was easy to paralyze the opponent, making it difficult for the opponent to find his real body. Fang Yan's body was slightly bent, his legs swaying, moving left and right, like a drunken crane. The closer Jin Donghai got, the more Fang Yan swayed. In the end, Fang Yan's real body disappeared, leaving behind countless afterimages in Jin Donghai's eyes. Since he couldn't see anything, he might as well not see anything. Jin Donghai closed his eyes, using his perception to sense Fang Yan's existence. For a brilliant martial artist, his senses were more reliable than his eyes. Boom, he punched out. He was secretly delighted, feeling the air resistance in front of him increase. It was the realistic feeling of hitting something, not the regret of missing a punch. His steps forward quickened, wanting his burning fist to pierce through Fang Yan's body. He liked the feeling of something burning, because that burning was caused by him. Heroic youths, fighting the heavens and fighting the earth. And he, the Southern Boxing King, Jin Donghai, liked to stifle the legendary miracles. Boom, he punched out. Even the surrounding sky was dyed red by his fist. It didn't feel right. One real and one fake, the front was real and the back was fake. He had clearly touched Fang Yan's real body, so why did his fist miss? Idiot. Fang Yan's cold voice came. His body dodged a step. You fell into my trap. That step just now sounded easy, but it was actually very difficult. First, he used the extremely difficult drunken crane riding the wind to confuse Jin Donghai, making it difficult for him to catch the real body. This caused his heart to be weak and his confidence to plummet. Then he used his real body to lure him into punching, and when it was hard to pull back his fist halfway, he suddenly used the brilliant heart of Taiji to increase his speed, leaving the moment before the fist hit the body. These two techniques were extremely rare, and the heart of Taiji was even rarer. It seemed like the world had changed, but in reality, it was only an instant. It was even only a few tenths of a second. His body dodged the fist that had already turned fiery red. Fang Plum Blossom stepped sideways and punched Jin Donghai's back. Jin Donghai's charging speed increased again, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body had already turned into a ball of furnace fire to begin with. Fang Yan slapped and forcibly injected his own energy into Jin Donghai's violent body, messing up his chi and blood and intensifying his violence. Naturally, the fire attacked the heart, and blood came out. Jin Donghai finally felt the danger. He had never underestimated his opponent, never. When he saw Fang Yan was able to quickly deal with the men in black who surrounded him at the critical moment when the car was about to fall into the pit, he saw this young man as an opponent on the same level as himself. However, it was only at this moment that he realized that the young man's performance was far better than he had expected. He had always thought that victory should be on his side. Now he was panicking. While he was sick, take his life. Fang Yan's body continued to spin, and like a tornado, he chased after Jin Donghai, and then he slapped Jin Donghai's back again and again. Jin Donghai's energy was hard and yang, and Fang Yan also attacked with a dangerous and fiery energy. The two energies entangled in Jin Donghai's body, and the fire and fire could not merge. Jin Donghai felt that his internal organs were about to melt, and he could only spit out mouthful after mouthful of blood. Jin Donghai was seriously injured, but he still ran with all his might. He knew that if he was one step slower, he would be killed by that vicious guy. Fang Yan's toes touched the ground, and his body leaped high like a rock spreading its wings, and then he punched the back of Jin Donghai's head. Bang! The sound of something exploding could be heard. Fang Yan's body flew away, and he did not have time to look back. Nothing was more important than saving his father, including revenge. Since ancient times, loyalty and righteousness could not be both. To the black-robed man, the choice he had to face was more difficult than loyalty and righteousness. He was the Snake Lord, and also a snake slave. Was he loyal to his master, or was he loyal to his feelings? This was indeed a difficult question. His master was holding on to his snake eye, so if he dared to disobey his master's orders, his master could easily kill him. And his disciple, this was the most profound and unforgettable thing in his memory. The images in his mind were constantly being refreshed, and there was almost nothing worth remembering. However, the image of those two tiny people waiting for him to return while riding on the door's ill was unforgettable. The black-robed man looked at the current Snake Lord with pity in his eyes and said, "Since you've already prepared yourself, then show me your best side. A Snake Lord should not be merciful at all." The current Snake Lord crawled up from the ground, his face covered in blood. He looked at the black-robed man standing in front of him, then bowed to him and took out a yellowed bamboo flute from his pocket. The bamboo flute let out a long and complicated sound, the strange tone repeated endlessly, making anyone who heard it feel drowsy. Then, something strange happened. The cold wind rose again, and the winter snow rose again. Rustling sounds came from the white snow, and countless animals poked their heads out of the snow. There were rattlesnakes with their tails swaying, scorpions with their entire bodies red, centipedes that seemed to be more than a meter long with countless feet, and countless green toads and star-spotted toads. They moved in groups, advancing with great momentum, and their target was the black-robed man who was standing there alone. 100 Poison Formation? The black-robed man had a gratified smile on his face and said, "You're even more outstanding than I thought." "Very good, that's my good disciple." The tone of the bamboo flute changed slightly, and the eyes of those awakened poisonous creatures turned blood red, and they began to attack the black-robed man. When the first poisonous snake was about to bite him, the black-robed man resolutely rushed toward the current snake lord. Snakes were flung out one after another, poisonous frogs were crushed, and centipedes were crushed one after another. The black-robed man's hands were flying, and some red or black medicinal foam was being sprayed out. His black robe fluttered, and every time it shook, the poisonous creatures that came close would turn around and flee. Then, under the urging of the music, they would charge forward again. One group fell to the ground, and another group would crawl back up and continue to advance. 100 Poison Formation, living beings do not approach. Once you enter the formation, you will not rest until you die. Whoosh, a strong light shone over. It was a car coming from afar. The car was using high beams, and the light illuminated the battlefield as bright as day. The current snake lord who was playing the bamboo flute and retreating, the black-robed man who was running forward, and the ugly creatures on the ground, clang. The car door was pushed open, and a young man dressed in white stood in the dazzling light. His entire body became tall and handsome, and his eyes shone brightly. The white-robed man coldly stared at the scene in front of him and angrily shouted, "Swallow's Dock is a sacred place, and it's also a place where you vicious clowns can run wild." Chapter 435. All ugly people were afraid of mirrors, and all ugly things were afraid of the light. Under the illumination of the light, the red-eyed venomous creatures panicked and had nowhere to hide. Their narrow triangular eyes, their hairy centipede legs, their hair-raising starry spots, and their protruding poisonous scars were all presented to the world. Because of the third party's intervention, both sides who were in the middle of a fierce battle stopped. The current snake lord stopped blowing the bamboo flute in his mouth. The sound of the flute dissipated, and the venomous creatures lost control and immediately fled in all directions. The black-robed man also stopped attacking and turned to look at the white-robed man standing next to the carriage. "Who are you?" "By Shio of Swallow Dock." The white-robed man replied. His voice was proud, and so was his expression. It was as if he was the prince of this snowy land, and the previous two snake lords and the reptiles on the ground were simply unsightly compared to him. The black-robed man pondered for a moment, then looked at Bai Shio and asked, "You want to stop me?" "I won't stop you." Bai Shio sneered. "I'm just telling you to get out. Don't tarnish the feng shui of Swallow Dock." The black-robed man laughed aloud, his voice hoarse and unpleasant to the ear. "Are the people of Swallow Dock all so condescending and insufferable?" He knew two people from Swallow Dock. One was Fang Yen, and the other was the man in front of him. Fang Yen was very proud, and his pride was in his bones. Bai Shio was also very proud, and his pride was displayed directly on his face. In comparison, he preferred Fang Yen. "Because this is Swallow Dock, and because we have the capital." "Do we have the capital? I don't believe it." The black-robed man said. He stuck two fingers into his mouth and blew a shrill whistle-like sound. The sound was faint and intermittent, but it traveled very far through the air. The venomous frogs and snakes that had just been driven away began to gather again, and all kinds of noises mixed together and swarmed over. Their eyes turned blood red again, and they were even more violent and crazy than when they were under the control of the bamboo flute. Their target was Bai Xiu, and they fearlessly charged towards the brightest spot. Screech, 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 gua, 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 sha, sha, sha. These poisonous beasts were neat and orderly. They lined up in rows and charged at Bai Xiu like soldiers lining up. Insignificant skill. Bai Xiu's handsome face was cold, his brows raised, and his voice was like the roar of a dragon and the roar of a tiger. A bunch of vile creatures want to enter the hall? Bai Xiu reached into his robe, and a silvery white light flashed. It was a soft sword tied to a belt. Shwa, blood splattered everywhere. The heads of the snakes, the toads, and the legs of the centipedes were all chopped off. It was as clean as a knife cutting through tofu. After a pause, Bai Xiu looked at the black-robed man's withered eye socket that had been dug out, saying, "You're not a snake lord, you can only be called a snake slave, right? You're just a monster who kills for others." The black-robed man's expression became ferocious, saying, "Killing is but a matter of nodding one's head to the ground, to humiliate one to this extent. Then let's fight to the death." The snake lord was indeed a snake slave. But to go from a noble snake lord to a slave without freedom and thought was a great humiliation to them. He could say that he was a snake slave, but he hated others calling him a snake slave. Just like how a person could say that they were fat and ugly, but they didn't like others saying that they were fat and ugly. Bai Xiu's words struck the heart, thoroughly enraging the black-robed man. Even the current snake lord's face was flushed, his expression ashamed and resentful, wanting to rush over and fight Bai Xiu several times. He was also a snake slave, even if he and his master had different masters, but this didn't change the fact that he was a snake slave. The black-robed man spread his hands, his black robe fluttering, like a bat about to spread its wings and fly. A dozen or so tiny red snakes the size of a pinky shot out from the black robe, splitting into 4 directions and attacking Bai Xiu. The black robe shook again, and another white snake with a horn on its head jumped onto the ground. Its 2 tiny antennae looked around, then began to move towards Bai Xiu. The speed at which it moved was very slow, as if it was worried that Bai Xiu would stomp it to death. The dozen or so red snakes circled around Bai Xiu like a dozen mice, their speed getting faster and faster, forming an illusory red line. Only when the long-horned white snake saw that Bai Xiu was surrounded by its companions did it move a few steps closer to Bai Xiu. But it still refused to approach. Bai Xiu held his sword with one hand, standing in place without moving. The white snake's antennae swayed, its mouth emitting a hurried, chirp sound. Whoosh, the red line was cut, and a red snake suddenly leaped up, pouncing towards Bai Xiu's neck from behind. The other dozen or so red snakes leaped up at the same time, flying towards Bai Xiu from all directions. Front, back, left, right, head, calf, crotch, every important part of his body was coveted by a red snake. Pooh! The dozen or so venomous snakes spat out red venom at the same time. The venom spread out, forming a giant poisonous web. These red snakes were known as life snakes, raised by poisonous blood since childhood, and were the life-saving venomous snakes raised by every snake monarch. They didn't grow in size, only venom. As their bodies became redder, the venom became thicker and thicker. When all these little snakes turned red, the venom became the purest form of poison. It could corrode clothes and skin, injure flesh and bones. Bai Xiu's body spun, the long sword in his hand dancing in an airtight dance. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. One by one, the red snakes were cut in half, and the bright red venom sprayed out even more wildly. At the same time, the long-horned white snake also moved. Its body was full of fat, but its speed was incomparably fast. Its crawling posture made it look like a meaty ball charging towards Bai Xiu, chirping as it ran. Boom! The long-horned white snake actually exploded, and the countless white fluids and organs in its body shot towards Bai Xiu. This was an explosive snake. It used its own body to destroy its prey, allowing its master to become the final winner. Explosive snakes could only be used once in their lives, and usually they were fed on food, which resulted in their fat body. This kind of attack was truly impossible to defend against. Whoosh! When Bai Xiu finished his last slash, and the last red snake was cut in half, Bai Xiu's body finally stopped spinning. He frowned as he looked at the piece of flesh on his arm that was rotting at a visible rate. His long sword slashed horizontally, and the rotten flesh was instantly dug out. The rotten flesh fell to the ground, but it continued to rot until the bright red flesh turned into a charcoal black. Bai Xiu glanced at his arm, extremely dissatisfied with the black-robed man. He took out a bottle of white powder and poured it on the hole on his arm, then took out a clean handkerchief and carefully bandaged it. He even tied the bandaged handkerchief into the shape of a butterfly. He took off the white robe that had a few holes on it, as he didn't like old or dirty clothes. Right now, he was also a bit dissatisfied with his own body, coldly saying, "Just now, I wanted to keep you here for Swallow Fort, but now, I want to keep you here for myself. A hole on my arm, she probably won't like it." Chapter 436. Bai Xiu was a perfectionist. He didn't like things that weren't perfect. For example, a shirt with a small hole in it, a pimple on his face, a fruit tree that only blossomed but didn't bear fruit, a road that didn't have an end. These were all things that were hard for him to accept. He liked to read and he read a lot of books. But he still felt that he didn't read enough, and that he didn't read enough. So he was still reading more and more books, and reading more and more books. On his way back, he encountered two people fighting, and because of a black-robed man, he had a piece of his flesh cut off. This was very imperfect for him. He needed perfection, and he needed to make his heart feel smooth and his thoughts clear. So, he decided to kill the black-robed man. Bai Xiu held the long sword in his hand, and walked towards the black-robed man step by step. He looked very relaxed, as if he was going to kill a chicken or a rabbit. With a leap, he floated up into the air. The long sword in his hand was raised high above his head, and he slashed at the black-robed man's head. Whoosh! The soft sword was infused with qi, and the sword let out a sound like a dragon's roar. The long sword swung, and its momentum was majestic. The black-robed man didn't dare to take it head-on. His black robe shook, and a poisonous white smoke sprayed out to conceal himself. At the same time, he retreated. Bai Xiu held his breath, and his body changed directions in the air, avoiding the attack of the white smoke. Like a rock spreading its wings, he chased after the black-robed man at an even faster speed. Still holding the long sword high, he slashed at the black-robed man's head again. It looked like this guy had obsessive-compulsive disorder. If he said he wanted to slash someone's head, he would do it. He couldn't stab the chest, couldn't chop off an arm, and couldn't stab an eye. He had to split the head in half. The black-robed man was still retreating. The tip of his foot touched the ground, and his body was already flying backward. The black robe fluttered in the wind, like a gliding bat with its wings spread. Whoosh whoosh. The long sword in Bai Xiu's hand swung twice in the air, and after using the force of the sword to adjust his posture, he once again slashed at the black-robed man's head. The first spurt of energy, the second decline, and the third exhaustion. After 3 consecutive strikes, he should have lost his will to fight. However, Bai Xiu was completely unaffected by this kind of common sense. Each sword strike was fiercer than the one before, and each sword strike was drier than the one before, and each sword strike was faster than the one before. The Thousand Leaves Army's sword was a dangerous move. Every strike was tricky and dangerous. Every strike was unexpected. Every strike was like a clap of thunder. Bai Xiu's sword was upright and upright, radiating boundless light. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, nothing strange, and nothing showy. A straight stab or a high slash would increase the pressure on the opponent, making it difficult for them to parry. A heavy sword without a sharp edge, great skill without skill. Bai Xiu's swordsmanship had already reached a higher level, and he could be said to be a master of his generation. His body was like a swimming dragon, and his sword was like a rainbow. He went straight for the black-robed man. The black-robed man couldn't dodge in time. Just as the sword was about to strike his head, the robe on his body suddenly puffed up. Black Robe took the initiative to greet Bai Xiu's long sword, blocking Bai Xiu's line of sight. Hiss! the long sword struck the black robe, splitting it in half. The black-robed man used the black robe to use the golden silkworm shedding its carapace. While the black robe was holding Bai Xiu back, he had already pounced on Bai Xiu from the side. He wore a copper claw on his right hand. The surface of the claw was dark blue. It was obvious that it had been soaked in venom for many years. The claw reached for Bai Xiu's back, determined to tear a piece of flesh from his body. Bai Xiu had just split open the black robe. He was at the moment when he had used up all his strength. Whether it was changing his move or turning around, it was extremely difficult. Bai Xiu did not change his move. He still maintained the posture of holding the sword with both hands and slashing down. The black-robed man's speed increased. The copper claw in his hand was already about to touch the flesh on Bai Xiu's neck. A sinister smile appeared on his face. His only eye was also filled with the joy of victory. He knew the power of his ghostly claw. As long as it touched Bai Xiu's skin, his body would rot and he would die. Closer. A little closer. Life and death were only a thin line away. Bai Xiu's body was falling, and the black-robed man's body was also falling. Plop. Bai Xiu and the black-robed man landed on the snowy ground at the same time. Their shoes made crunching sounds as they stepped on the deep snow. Bai Xiu maintained the posture of holding the sword, his back facing the black-robed man. The black-robed man stood behind Bai Xiu, pain and confusion in his eyes. How could this be? How could this be? He had clearly won. The ghostly claw in his hand was about to tear off a piece of flesh from his neck. As long as his ghostly claw touched his body, he would be able to tear off a piece of flesh from his neck. Then that piece of flesh would rapidly rot. His flesh, meridians, bones, hair, his entire body would rot into a puddle of mud. Swish. Bai Xiu pulled out the long sword in his hand. He held a long sword in his right hand. He used that sword to split open the black-robed man's black robe. He also held a long sword in his right hand. When the black-robed man lunged at him from behind, he used this long sword to stab through the black-robed man's abdomen. Bai Xiu had two swords, two flexible swords. He purposely showed his back to the black-robed man, pretending that he couldn't turn around or change his moves. He lured the black-robed man to attack him, and then ended the battle in one fell swoop. Whether it was the timing, acting, or ruthlessness, they were all impeccable. Bai Xiu pulled the long sword away. Just as the black-robed man's abdomen was about to spurt blood, Bai Xiu kicked out and sent the black-robed man flying. Bai Xiu didn't like to be stained with blood. Poochie, the black-robed man's body fell to the ground, then slid on the ice until he hit a hard object. Shifu, the current Snake Lord, saw that his master was injured and hurriedly rushed in his direction. The current Snake Lord wanted to help the black-robed man up, but the black-robed man waved his hand to stop him. Master, how are your injuries? The current Snake Lord worriedly looked at the black-robed man and asked. I'll heal you. Do you still remember the first time you were bitten by a snake? The black-robed man looked at his disciple with a gentle smile. That ugly face had a touch of kindness to it, and it actually looked more pleasing to the eye. A person's appearance was born from their heart. If they didn't have any evil thoughts in their heart, a person's appearance would naturally give others a good impression. I remember, the current Snake Lord said. He and his sister followed the black-robed man back. In a rundown courtyard, he saw so many snakes for the first time. There were snakes crawling on the ground, standing on the walls, coiling on the trees, and even the wooden door was covered with snakes. The door didn't have a lock, and this kind of courtyard didn't need a lock. No one dared to walk into a snake's nest. He and his sister were terrified. When they turned around to run, a green-eyed snake fell on his head. He was about to open his mouth to scream, but the green-eyed snake bit his lips. That was the first time he was bitten by a snake. From then on, he formed a lifelong bond with these cute and cold animals. Before I brought you back, I didn't want you to raise snakes with me. I wanted you to stay at my place for one night and send you away the next day. Do you still remember how you reacted after being bitten by a snake? You grabbed the snake and held it in your hand, carefully looking at it. Your eyes looked at it curiously, and it also looked at you curiously. At that time, I knew that you were the same kind of person as us. The black-robed man recounted the past that had already been buried in the river of memories. That's why I kept you here. I taught you how to raise snakes, how to get close to snakes, how to control snakes, and how to fight snakes. You were naturally close to those snakes, and those snakes never rejected you. You performed very well, and in many ways, you were even better than me as a teacher. But he found us and asked me to work for them, to become his snake slave. If I didn't agree, he would kill all of us, including you and your sister. I agreed, dug out my own snake's eye and gave it to him, turning myself into a mindless killer. The black-robed man chuckled and said, "Isn't this what we're good at? These years, I've killed many people and done many evil deeds. I'm tired and annoyed. When will it end? If I kill one, there will be another. If I kill one day, there will be another. As long as I don't die, I will continue to kill, continue to commit evil deeds. Most importantly, I don't know who I will kill next, good or bad, men or women, even the elderly and children. I don't know them, and they don't know me. I've killed so many that I've become numb. Teacher, who is it? Who are they? Who are you, a snake slave? Who came to find you?" "They also didn't come to find you?" The black-robed man spoke with a sorrowful voice. "This is the nightmare of us snake lords, a punishment. We have harmed many people, so there will be even more vicious people to punish us. They used your and your sister's lives to force me to work for them. Then when you grew up, they used your sister's life to force you to work for them. As long as our snake lord bloodline continues, they will have generations after generations of snake slaves to work for them. We can't resist, we will become their puppets for generations, teacher." The black-robed man gestured for his disciple to take off the demonic claw on his hand and dip his finger in the blood of the wound on his abdomen. Then he placed the blood-stained finger on his disciple's forehead and released an S-shaped snake symbol. The black-robed man grabbed his disciple's hand and spoke with a solemn voice. "I pass the title of Snake Lord to my disciple Mui, to worship the spirit of the snake god, to love the people of our race. May the heavenly God protect our race, to live and die with dignity, to be free for generations to come. Flesh does not rot, snake blood boils." There was a record of the Snake Lord in the 100 Lives Classics, born in Xiangxi, the king of snakes. The flame of inheritance is passed on, the old dies and the new rises. At this point, the current Snake Lord was officially crowned. Chapter 437. The sky was getting darker and the wind was getting colder and colder. Even the snow that had stopped falling started to flutter again. Fang Yan had never hated winter in Yanjing so much. The car was stuck in the pit. Fang Yan could only run on his feet. The soles of his shoes were already worn out. Only the uppers tied to his ankles were a burden. He had already torn off the 2 rags. Fang Yan stepped on the ice with his bare feet. His bare feet collided with the surface of the ice, making a pa-pa-pa sound. His head was forward and his upper body was slightly bent, maintaining a high-speed charging posture. His face was stiff from the cold wind. His eyes were squinted from the snow. He was burning with anxiety, but his face was cold and calm. This was the most dangerous moment. This was the most important moment. The more dangerous and important it was, the more he couldn't make a single mistake. He ran too fast, like a ghost in the wilderness. Screech! Fang Yan's body came to an abrupt stop. Because he was running too fast, his feet spun a circle on the spot to keep his body straight. In front of him stood a man in black with a black mask. "I'm assassin," the man in black said. Fang Yan didn't say anything and rushed toward the man in black. No one could stop him, be it the Fist King or assassin, Yama or God. He had to save his father. He had to save his father. Unless his father died. Unless he died. The flame was passed on. The old died and the new was established. In other words, only when the old Snake King died would a new Snake King be born. The current Snake King naturally understood this. It was because his master had disappeared for many years that the outside world thought he was dead. That was why he was called Snake King. Of course, it was just a coronation among the people. He didn't get the blessing of the previous Snake King. Now, the black-robed man was dipped in God's blood, drew a snake talisman, and personally passed the position of Snake King to his disciple. This ceremony was simple and important. Master, the current Snake King, the only Snake King, grabbed his master's hand and shouted in a sorrowful voice. "You'll be fine. Nothing will happen to you. When you were not here, I also learned some medical skills and some voodoo. I can help you heal. You won't die. I can't let you die." He took out a bunch of medicine bottles from his pocket, uncorked them, and poured all the red and white powders onto the wound on his master's abdomen. His black clothes had long since been dyed a brownish red. Blood was flowing out of the wound. The Snake Lord waved his hand and said, "I won't die, I just want to put an end to it. Some things should have been settled many years ago. But at that time I was still afraid, so I couldn't go that far. Master, you don't need to do anything. Whatever you want to do, I will do it for you. You just need to live a safe and peaceful life," the current Snake Lord said anxiously, like a drowning man grabbing onto the last piece of wood that could save his life. For the black-robed man, the current Snake Lord and his sister were his only family in this world. He had no love, no marriage, and didn't know what Taoism was. He had never experienced being waited for. The only people who had waited for him were the two little ones he picked up from the outside. So, when those people used their lives to threaten him, he dug out his own snake eye and gave it to them, using his life's worth to trade with them. He didn't have a family, but he longed for one. He didn't understand emotions, but he gave them his most sincere feelings. For the current Snake Lord, wasn't it the same? His sister was kidnapped, and he originally thought that she was her only family in this world. So, he risked his life to kill Fang Yen. After the mission failed, he put down his dignity and personal reputation to negotiate with Fang Yen, begging Fang Yen to give him a chance. He didn't even hesitate to follow his master's old path and become someone else's snake slave. Snake slave, that was such a heavy and humiliating title. He didn't expect that he would eventually encounter such a dilemma. On one side was his master who gave him the snake eye, and on the other side was his master who saved him and taught him how to live. This mission was crueler than ever before. His sister's fate was unknown, and his master was about to leave him. These were the two remaining family members of the current Snake Lord in this world. How could the Snake Lord watch his master die without doing anything? The black-robed man climbed up from the ground with difficulty and said with a smile, "You have your own mission. Your mission is to live and save your sister. If one day you two get married and have a child, give him to a good family to raise. Don't let him follow you to raise snakes. The Snake Lord's bloodline is too cruel." Master. The black-robed man patted the Snake Lord's shoulder and prepared to leave. Thump. The Snake Lord knelt down. His head hit the ground heavily, and he kowtowed 3 times to the black-robed man. The black-robed man waved his hand and didn't turn around. "Are you leaving?" Bai Xiu stood in front of the black-robed man with his sword and coldly said, "I don't agree." He said he would kill the black-robed man, so he would kill the black-robed man. He must do what he said, even if he only said it to himself in his heart. Perhaps the black-robed man had his own tragic fate, or perhaps he had his own difficulties. But who cared? He ran into Swallow Fort's territory to commit murder and arson. This was a huge crime. He had to make him stay for Swallow Fort. Anyone from Swallow Fort who saw him must think of a way to make him stay. The black-robed man had his own family to protect, while Bai Xiu had his own standpoint to uphold. One in black and one in white, one in the dark and one in the light, they were natural enemies. The black-robed man stopped, looked at the undisguised killing intent in Bai Xiu's eyes, and said softly, "I'm already a dying man. If you let me go, perhaps it'll be good for everyone. I'll fulfill a wish and you'll get rid of a problem. For you, a crisis will be averted. For Fang Yen, one less opponent. First of all, your wish is not my wish. Second of all, the crisis you speak of is not a crisis for me. As for whether Fang Yen has one less opponent, that has nothing to do with me. I think he'll be more than happy to kill his enemies himself." Bai Xiu was not moved by the black-robed man. "You can't leave." He was a gentle person on the outside, but stubborn on the inside. Once he made up his mind, he would not change it. Except for the one standing in front of him was his mister. His mister. The black-robed man showed a regretful expression, saying, "Why do you think you can definitely make me stay? Just because you stabbed me with your sword? Do you understand the meaning of the Snake Lord? Have you experienced the true power of the Snake Lord? The youngsters of Swallow Fort are a bit overconfident. Sometimes it's really annoying. Why not try?" Bai Xiu proudly said. Bai Xiu's stab was extremely ruthless, piercing through the black-robed man's abdomen. Even after the Snake Lord poured all of his medicinal powder on the wound, it alleviated the black-robed man's injury. However, this was not enough to completely stop the bleeding. The black-robed man ignored the wound on his abdomen and took the initiative to rush towards Bai Xiu. Bai Xiu also stabbed forward with his sword, aiming for the black-robed man's chest. One was like a ferocious tiger hunting its prey, the other like a butterfly plucking flowers. One was fierce, the other light. Their bodies were about to collide in an instant. What was surprising was that the black-robed man was unarmed, and actually used his own flesh and blood to meet Bai Xiu. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the long sword in Bai Xiu's hand trembled, producing a dozen or so sword sparks. The tip of the sword was like a snake's head, looking for the most suitable place to attack. The black-robed man punched out, his arms striking towards the long sword in Bai Xiu's hand. Whoosh, the wind from the punch was sharp and domineering. The flexible sword in Bai Xiu's hand changed from a stab to a slash. He only needed one slash to take away the black-robed man's arm. However, his eyes turned cold, and he once again changed from a slash to a stab. The tip of the long sword once again let out a whooshing sound like a viper's tongue, stabbing towards the black-robed man's chest. It was as if he was purposely letting the black-robed man go. The black-robed man's fist blasted over. The wind from the fist blew Bai Xiu's long hair that was tied up into a bun. The long sword in Bai Xiu's hand stabbed into the black-robed man's chest, fresh blood gushing out along the blade. With every step the black-robed man took, that long sword stabbed in a little more. However, the black-robed man did not have the intention of stopping, still pouncing towards Bai Xiu fearlessly. A stance of wanting to fight to the death with Bai Xiu. His body was about to be pierced by the long sword very soon. Once again, another hole was pierced through it. However, Bai Xiu did not let him have his wish. He kicked out, sending the black-robed man who was pouncing towards him flying. A few drops of fresh blood dripped onto Bai Xiu's wrist. A heart-wrenching pain came. The flesh on the back of that hand actually started to turn a charred black color. The Snake Lord actually turned his own body into a medicinal storehouse, and that red blood became a murderous poison. If Bai Xiu let him approach just now, most likely Bai Xiu's entire body would be corroded into charcoal because of being stained with his blood. The black-robed man's body fell heavily to the ground. Crack! Fang Yixing, who had been lying on the ground with half of his body covered in snow, suddenly flipped over, raised the long sword in his hand high up, and stabbed it into the chest of the black-robed man who had fallen right next to him. Screech! The black-robed man's chest was stabbed, and his body that had just wanted to sit up weakly drooped down. Fang Yixing laughed heartily, shouting at the top of his lungs, "I said I would slash you, I will slash you, I did it, I did it." He didn't want to kill the enemy, he just wanted to slash his opponent. He did it, he finally did it. Chapter 438. Hua Xia's proverb says, "The spear is the king of all weapons, the sword is the king of all weapons, and the rod is the leader of all weapons." The old drunkard was cleaning his spear. It was a silver spear, made of refined steel. The tip of the spear reflected a cold light. The old drunkard was good at using spears, but he rarely used them. The spear was heavy and slender. The spear's momentum was mighty and domineering. Once the momentum of the spear was connected, it would become an impenetrable spear formation. It fit the old drunkard's invincible image very well. However, the old drunkard hadn't used a spear for a long time, including when he crossed the East Ocean and challenged the 37 East Islands. Because he used his strength to the extreme, what he needed to learn now was how to save it. So he started using his sword or his fists. He had kept this phoenix spear for a long time, but after his meridians were destroyed in the battle with the dragon god, he never took it out again. The silver spear was covered in dust in the corner, so he took it out and cleaned it. The wooden door of the courtyard was pushed open. Feng Hui was sitting in a wheelchair, looking at the old drunkard cleaning his spear in the room and asked, "Why are you cleaning your spear?" "The killing intent is too strong," the old drunkard said indifferently. "When the killing intent is strong, the spear can be used to show its power." Feng Hui sighed softly and said, "Your body hasn't recovered yet, you can't use your strength, just rest well." Feng Yan went out, Feng Hao went out, Cheng Exen also went out with his people. The heroes and warriors also went out. Feng Yan went out, Feng Hao went out, Zhao Cheng went out, the heroes and warriors also went out, I can also go out. The old drunkard put the dusty handkerchief into his pocket, stood up with the spear in his hand, and as he passed by Feng Hui he loudly said, "I'm not going out as Hua Xia's Azure Dragon, I'm going out as a member of the Feng family. I don't have strength, but I have martial arts. I don't have martial arts, but I have brute force. I kill with blood, cut with knives. That will always be useful." Feng Hui laughed and said, "Then let's go. I'll recite a poem for you." The old drunkard pushed open the back door of the courtyard and quickly disappeared in the snow. The old wooden door creaked as it was blown open and closed by the wind. Feng Hui's voice was hoarse and sorrowful as he recited an ancient poem, 10 years Yen Feng, drinking the Han River. They were both spinning wheels. Regret that we met in the past, 3,000 miles away, 3,000 miles away. The heroic spirits of the universe are tranquil and generous, willing to serve in mere ink and brush. The ambition of a man wants a spear and a sword. Drunk in the autumn wind at the Yuan Gate, watching the setting sun and flags set in red. I love the snow on the edge of the clouds, a cold horn, the smooth sand and fine grass, a few points of flying swan. As Feng Hui chanted, he slapped the handle of the wheelchair with his palm. His eyes passed through the wooden door and the courtyard wall to look into the distance. Feng but he palm he Feng he, but he was of, but he was Yen Feng. And the feelings of the lake and the sea, the friendship of the golden orchids. Don't regret that the jade cup is empty. Of gods. Of. Protect the return of the Feng family's children. Heavenly gods and great immortals, ancestors of the Feng clan, please ensure the return of the Feng clan's youngest daughter. Protect the return of the Feng family's children. Heavenly gods and great immortals, ancestors of the Feng clan, please ensure the return of the Feng clan's youngest daughter. Protect the return of the Feng family's children. Again and again, again and again. Like an old crow cawing, like a cuckoo crying blood. As expected of an assassin. He was very fast. It was so fast that it was unbelievable. The only flaw was that this idiot had chosen the black invisibility cloak for the sake of showing off. Did he not know that on the vast expanse of white snow, black was the most conspicuous color? Feng Yan felt very strange. How did the mastermind find so many experts to attack him? He was just a nobody, was it worth it? He already understood that this was an ambush aimed at him. Their target was not his father, Feng Yixing. Feng Yixing was just a scholar. To them, he was just a useless person without any influence or compatibility. Why would they spend so much effort to kill him? Their target was Feng Yan. They wanted to harm Feng Yixing to lure Feng Yan out. To summon him out of Swallow Dock and then carry out a killing spree. Their goal was to kill Feng Yan. From the traps they had set up and the experts they had arranged, it could be seen that they would not stop until they achieved their goal. Feng Yan was the victim. He did not have any choice. If he could, he was willing to sacrifice everything, spend billions of his family's wealth, give up his dignity and honor. He was willing to kneel to this black-clothed man and the experts he might face next. As long as they were willing to let him go. As long as they gave him time to save his father. He had a very bad feeling in his heart. He was worried that his father had already died or was in trouble. He hoped that it was the latter. This was the best thing he could imagine at this moment. Feng Yan's eyes were blood red. He looked like a poisonous snake whose mind had been taken away by the fighting snake dance. He was so anxious that his face was red and his eyes were bloodshot. The assassin's attack failed again. The scimitar in his hand drooped down. It looked weak. His eyes that were covered by the black gauze were filled with shock and disbelief. There was actually someone who could avoid his cross slash? 1 slash, 10 slashes, 10 slashes. 10 slashes were unleashed in an instant. It sealed off all the routes of attack or retreat. How did he avoid it? He panted lightly. He used a special method to quickly adjust his breathing so that his body was in the best state. After every charge, there would be a period of emptiness. He needed to use his strength and fighting spirit to fill up this period of emptiness. Otherwise, it would give the opponent an opportunity to take advantage of him. The assassin rushed out again. He raised the scimitar in his hand high. His body made gaudy and complicated movements in front of Fang Yan. Fang Yan's body rushed forward, straight into the saber array created by his dozens of slashes. When Fang Yan retreated again, the scimitar was in Fang Yan's hand. The saber was not stained with blood. It was as if it had never been used. A thin red line appeared on the assassin's neck. The thin line became thicker and thicker. Then blood spurted out. The assassin's eyes widened. Even now, he still did not understand what had happened. What he did not know was that no matter how fast he was, he had to stop in Fang Yan's Tai Chi domain. The disguise he made could not deceive Fang Yan's heart of Tai Chi whether he took the X line or the S line. Fang Yan only needed to find the line between him and himself. Snatch the saber. Just in an instant, Fang Yan threw the scimitar in his hand to the ground. Then he rushed forward again. Fang Yixing would not sympathize with the black-robed man. For him, the black-robed man was his biggest enemy at the moment. Whether it was kidnapping Zhou Fan and poisoning him, or intercepting and killing him on the way, he had countless reasons to kill him. A good person? What kind of good person would use such a vicious trick on an old and young family? Fang Yixing was the head of the family. He had the responsibility and obligation to ensure the safety of his family and protect his loved ones from harm. Even if he was not strong enough, he would not abandon such a responsibility. However, Fang Yixing knew that he was not strong enough. He knew that he had no chance of winning against the black-robed man. Therefore, he tied the long saber to his arm and fused himself with the long saber. He would fight the black-robed man to the death. He was willing to give up his life. All he wanted was to slash the black-robed man with his saber. In that case, if Fang Yan encountered him, it would not be so difficult. He was afraid that the black-robed man would hurt his son. It was a very stupid, very barbaric, and very helpless way of giving up. Because, for a cultured person like Fang Yixing, this was the only thing he could do. However, he had never been able to do it. After he was sent flying by the black-robed man, he fainted for a long time. More than half of his body was covered in snow. The ice and snow on the ground froze his limbs, creating a natural bed of ice for him. Only when his head was about to be sealed by the ice and snow did he suddenly wake up. His body was weak and powerless. Even opening his eyes was a very difficult thing to do. He heard the black-robed man's voice. He also heard Bai Xiu's voice. Bai Xiu was the most outstanding young man in Swallow Fort. Of course, this evaluation had to be added. After his son's heart of Tai Chi broke through again, he became a young man who could compete with Bai Xiu. Yi Wen of the Yi family was also an outstanding young man. She was even known as the #1 person in the younger generation of the inner Jianghu. Unfortunately, she was a woman. This was such a pity for the Yi family. Fang Yixing knew very little about Bai Xiu. The two of them could only be considered acquaintances. He knew that Bai Xiu was outstanding and proud, but he did not know what kind of person Bai Xiu was. But he knew that Fang Yan did not like Bai Xiu, because Bai Xiu had stolen the girl he liked the most. Fang Yixing did not move. He did not move at all. He was waiting for his strength to recover, waiting for the opportunity to slash. When the black-robed man was kicked away by Bai Xiu again, when the black-robed man happened to be lying next to Fang Yixing, his opportunity came. He flipped over and stabbed out with the blade he had dreamed of. He felt that he was complete. Shifu! Snake Sovereign shouted anxiously. The current Snake Sovereign had a smile of relief on his face, but he could no longer speak. Blood gushed out from his chest, drenching almost half of his body. He clenched one hand into a fist, and the energy in his body surged toward his head. Bang! Countless white dots flew out of the countless holes on his face. These dots were like silkworm chrysalises that stuck to Fang Yixing's face and body. They began to wriggle and quickly burrow into Fang Yixing's body. These were the ghost's sorrow chrysalises that fed on human flesh, blood, and bones. The real Snake Sovereign was a vicious and venomous snake. Chapter 439. Fang Yixing's stab was very fierce, and it pierced right into the black-robed man's heart. His heart had already been pierced, and even a great principal golden immortal would not be able to save him. The black-robed man knew his situation, so he used the last of his strength to spray the ghost's worry snake chrysalis out of his face. When he felt his heavy head lighten up, he finally closed his eyes slowly. The black-robed man died in battle. The curtains fell on the snake monarch. He died pitifully and miserably. Even in death, he did not fulfill his wish. Master! The snake monarch rushed over and hugged his master's body. The snake monarch's body was dripping with blood, and his body gradually became cold. Fang Yixing's body twitched nonstop, and his exposed skin had already turned purplish-black. Originally, his head and face were frozen stiff, and his hair and eyebrows were covered in frost. However, in just a few seconds, he began to sweat profusely, as if he was being roasted by a high temperature. His nose began to bleed and black blood flowed out. Then his eyes, mouth, ears, and even some of the newly formed holes on his face began to bleed. The chrysalis found a new body to attach to, and began to feast on the fresh blood and flesh. All the blood was black in color. The blood had already been stained with the venom of the chrysalis, and became a pool of unusable blood. Fang Yixing's hands scratched his face randomly. He wanted to tear off a piece of skin and a piece of flesh to pull out those little bugs from his body. However, this was simply too difficult. His face and body were badly mutilated from his scratches. Bai Xiu walked over and looked at Fang Yixing, who was lying on the ground in pain. He frowned slightly. After hesitating for a moment, he used the tip of his sword to stab Fang Yixing's 18 acupuncture points. When those acupuncture points also began to bleed, Fang Yixing's body finally calmed down. He cut off Fang Yixing's pain nerves, so he did not have to endure such pain. Of course, he did not have to bear any pain. He became a vegetable who did not understand pain and cold. In less than a minute, Fang Yixing was tormented by the chrysalis that had drilled into his body, and looked like he was neither human nor ghost. He looked like he had aged several decades. Bai Xiu squatted on the ground, looked at Fang Yixing and asked, "What do you have to say?" He knew that with Fang Yixing's body condition, he wouldn't be able to hold on any longer. The last snake monarch had planted a pupa before he died, and even the current snake monarch had no way of taking it out. What's more, Fang Yixing had just stabbed Snake Lord's master to death. Snake Lord might not be willing to help Fang Yixing take out the monsters in his body that made people want to die. Fang Yixing's face was covered in blood and he looked very scary. He looked at Bai Xiu with a fawning smile. She wasn't trying to curry favor with him, but rather, she was begging him to pass on her words. Because Bai Xiu was the only person he could entrust it to. I've always been proud of Fang Yan, proud to have such a son. He's very talented in the path of martial arts, and he's also very smart. I don't need to tell him this, he knows this. Fang Yixing said softly. I don't know how far he can go in the future, but I know that he will go very, very far in the future. He will go to the place that we, the ancestors, can't see. I firmly believe this, because he's my son, although I, as his father, can't be like him. No matter how hard I try, I can't be better than him. I trust Fang Yan very much, so I have nothing to say. My father only hopes that he can take care of himself, and I know that Fang Yan can take good care of him. I want you to pass on a message to Lu Wan. Fang Yixing's eyes were sad, and 2 streaks of bloody tears slid down his cheeks. He said with a sad and regretful voice, I can't tell her face to face, and I can't say it in front of her. I love her. I've never said this before, and I won't have the chance to say it in the future. If I don't say it now, I may never be able to say it to her in this lifetime. I, Fang Yixing, have been mediocre all my life, and I may not have the chance to enter the ancestral hall of the Fang family after I die. If I have the chance to enter, write on my plaque that I'm the husband of a good woman and the father of a good son. Fang Yixing reached out to grab Bai Xiu's hand and begged, bring it back for me. I will bring it back, Bai Xiu nodded and said. Thank you, Fang Yixing said in a weak voice. His hand fell down, and he closed his eyes unwillingly. Fang Yixing of Swallow Dock died in battle. Fang Yan finally arrived. He saw his grandfather's disciple, Wang Dong, and his father, Fang Yixing. He saw 2 corpses. Fang Yan's hair was disheveled, and his clothes were torn. He ran over barefooted. His eyes were full of murderous intent, and he looked like a mountain ghost or a savage man. He knelt in front of Fang Yixing and didn't dare to touch his body. There was no sadness or joy on his face, as if he had become an idiot. Yes, Fang Yan had indeed become an idiot. He couldn't accept the fact in front of him, and he didn't want to accept the fact in front of him. How could his father die? How could his father die? Fang Yan, get up and practice. Dad, it's only 6 o'clock. The sun isn't even up. The ancients dance at the sound of the rooster, and the rooster has crowed 3 times. Get up quickly and don't be lazy. A father was strict, because he couldn't do it himself, so he hoped that his son could do it. He put all his hopes and efforts on Fang Yan. This was also the reason why Fang Yan had a grudge against him, and the relationship between father and son had never been so close. Fang Yan had a good relationship with his mother, Lu Wan, but he lacked friendly communication with his father, Fang Yixing. Fang Yixing liked to scold his son with a straight face, but Fang Yan didn't fall for it at all. He felt that his son was stubborn and inflexible. Conflicts between the 2 often broke out. Fang Yan, there are 3 mistakes in the rules for a disciple that you wrote down from memory today. Go and copy it 30 times. Are you going to copy the mistakes 30 times? Yes, copy the whole thing 30 times. Dad, don't disobey. Because he liked ancient literature, he hoped that his son could also like ancient literature. He taught him how to write with a brush, and taught him how to leave blank and how thick the ink should be. He hoped that his son would be well-versed in both literature and martial arts. He hoped that his son would become a dragon among men. He hoped that his son would be the most outstanding son in the world. Therefore, when his son made a mistake, or when his son wrote a wrong poem or sentence, he punished his son very severely. Fang Yan, I want to discuss something with you. Dad, you say, your grandfather and the Yi family have discussed it, and they want you to compete with the girl from the Yi family. Dad, why should I compete with the woman from the Yi family? She doesn't like me, and I don't like her. She's cold and always has a straight face, as if everyone owes her $200. It's an exchange competition to deepen the relationship between the 2 families. Friendship comes first, competition comes second. You just need to go on stage and do a perfunctory job, don't think too much. Okay then. I'll just have a casual competition with her. Fang Yan, I want to discuss something with you. Dad, you say, your grandfather and the Yi family have discussed it, and they want you to compete with the girl from the Yi family again. Compete again? Didn't we just compete last year? No, I won't compete with her. She hit my eyes until they were swollen, and I didn't have the face to go out for more than a month. It's because you lost last year's competition, and your grandfather isn't convinced, so he wants you to compete with her again. Your grandfather is old, and his health isn't good. Why don't we just accommodate him? It hasn't been easy for the old man to live his life. Isn't he just fighting for his pride now? Dad, I'm afraid I can't beat her. That woman is too powerful. Her Yi family's fist is already at the 3rd rank. That won't happen. You are our Fang family's most talented Taiji successor. Even underestimate says that you are a martial arts genius. Your grandfather has pinned all his hopes on you, and I also believe that you can do it. What if I lose again? Impossible. What? Fang Yan is sick? Shu, lower your voice. Our son has just fallen asleep. Just now his fever reached 39. Six. Tell me, what kind of lousy training method are you thinking of? What kind of method is not good? But you want him to take off his clothes and run along the shore of Shihizi and use the snow to wipe his body. How low is the temperature today? How can the child not get sick on such a cold day? That's because his physique is too weak. If his physique is strong enough, would this bit of cold wind be enough to make him catch a cold? That won't do. Our Fang family doesn't have such a weak bone. When he recovers, we have to double the difficulty of the training. Don't you dare. The child is already so sick, and you're still thinking of how to torture him. I don't agree, and I won't allow you to train the child in such a way. You're just being unreasonable, do you know that? A loving mother will spoil her son. Fang Yixing slammed the door and left. When Fang Yan was half asleep, a gentle and honest man's voice came over. Fang Yixing held a bowl of black Chinese medicine and squatted beside Fang Yan's bed. He lowered his voice and said softly, Fang Yan, I made a bowl of medicinal soup for you. Come, drink the soup. You'll be better after you drink it. The medicine is bitter. It's not bitter. I specially added a piece of rock candy for you. Fang Yan, the weather is cold, your mother told you to take care of your body. Fang Yan, have you been busy with your studies recently? Your mother told you to come back when you have time, she's been talking about you recently. Fang Yan, your mother said, this was a tough and gentle man. This was a man who was stubborn and tolerant with no bottom line. This was a man with great literary talent but was not good at expressing himself verbally. This was an excellent husband, a great father. Dad. Fang Yan hugged Fang Yixing's stiff body that was wrapped in ice and snow, shouting hoarsely, tears gushed out like a fountain. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.